you would please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I call the meeting of the Middle River Planning Board.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Okay, our first item tonight is the approval of the agenda. Is there anyone that would have a comment or addition, subtraction, or anything, or a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Mr. Cole.
Second.
Thanks, Mr. Foster. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now, approval of minutes of the special meeting we had on July 23rd. Any questions? Any additions, subtractions, anything? All right, Chair would entertain a motion. Thanks, Mr. Oliver. Next, anyone else? Second? All right, thank you, Mr. Kimsey. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, public comment. Do you want to start with the email comment or?
I just wanted to give our new town manager, Matthew McCarahan, a chance to introduce himself at the beginning
Absolutely.
of public comment, and then I'll defer to the chair how you want to proceed next, if that's all right with you.
That's outstanding. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you.
Thank you, board members. Thank you for having me. I promise I'm not going to take too much of your time with the agenda ahead of you and with the great crowd behind me as well. But I just want to say it's a pleasure meeting you all, and it's a pleasure seeing this room as full as it is. Being my first planning board meeting, I'm excited that this is the amount of people that come every time for the planning board.
Oh,
meeting,
yeah,
right? We have set the
Definitely,
standard.
definitely.
Yes. But as Mike was so nice to introduce me, my name is Matthew McCarahan. I am the new town manager here in the town of Mills River. Started last Monday, so still learning and still getting to know all the work that you guys have been doing for the past years. And so I just want to say a little bit about who I am and where I come from, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. But I come here from the village of Pinehurst in Pinehurst, North Carolina, where I spent about 3 years handling their strategic planning and their performance. So my experience and my background is the better part of a decade working in organizational performance and working through helping communities plan for their future. And so I know that this probably, rings true for the work that you all do is planning for now, but then also planning for where we want to go and what do we want to be as a community looking forward. And so one of the many aspects of my job is to work with our dedicated and wonderful staff to make sure that we recognize what the town of Mills River wants to be and working with our council to ensure that we actually achieve those goals moving forward. So with that being said, I'm going to be able to hang out for a little bit after this meeting as well if there's any questions or concerns, and then we can go from there. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And
you.
welcome. Glad to have you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and start with public comment. People that are willing to come and sign up. So we're very grateful that you're here. Mr. Magaha, if you'd be willing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I got you loud and clear.
A little different being on this side of the podium. Yeah, I'm here to speak on the Brown Ridge Road project that's being considered. If you'll give me a moment to pull up my notes, some of the concern, and I'm very open-minded about the project. And I look forward to any presentation that they give today. Some concerns that we have in the Regal Knolls neighborhood, which would be at the foot of the hill where the proposed, from what I've seen from the plans, the main road entrance would be for the apartment complex is just a couple concerns we have is, what's going to happen to the airport noise when we change the landscape of that top in there, right now, which is a fairly dense wooded area up there. And, if we change, what happens to the noise if we change that landscape into an apartment complex kind of environment? Some other concerns are, we already have a traffic problem during school hours on Butler Bridge Road. And while a large percentage of that traffic coming from the apartment complex may go toward Asheville, any amount that's added to Butler Bridge, can cause a real problem during those hours, especially during the school hours. And I look forward to hearing where the children that'll be going to this, living in this apartment complex, where will they be going to school at? I think we're already having some issues with Glen Marlowe being at capacity as it is. And of course, I look forward to hearing that. Specifically the road that comes into the apartment complex as proposed. Now where the road is, if a car comes down the drive, you can hear it fairly well, but the traffic's so light that it's not bad. And I can see it from my house, and other ones can see it from their house. With the increase in traffic volume on where the road is that's planned, concern there's gonna be a lot of noise from cars coming in and out, and also we're gonna see every car that comes in and out. Even with the foliage back up in the, during these months, you can still see the cars coming in. And lastly, is this the direction we want to go? Are we allowing South Asheville and Arden to creep into Mills River with a larger proposed apartment complex is a concern of mine. But again, I'm open-minded. I'm looking forward to hearing their presentation, and I thank you all for hearing me.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Frady.
Leaving for Jerry in case he got dropped.
I'm Jerry Frady, lived here all my life.
Yes, sir.
Live on Boston Highway. I just got concerns with the rezoning. I'm not sure that I understand it completely. I hate I missed the last planning board meeting. But one of my concerns is I live on 280. I got 2 acres there, quite a bit of road frontage there, and my son has a shop there. I have a shop there, and my son works out of that thing part-time. He worked out of there 2 years full-time, and then he took a job. He works out at Smith's now, and, but I saw in there where auto shops is one of the things that's totally, and I don't understand why that is. And then another thing, a lot of people living up 280, my wife's a realtor, she can tell you that the property values there are commercial. I mean, who wants to live on a 5-lane highway? You know what I'm saying? And I hear people say, we don't want to turn it into Arden or whatever. Don't let them run sewer or water out through there. And I think that would take care of most of that, but there's some small, you could do small businesses or whatever. I mean, like I say, my son's shop's there, and probably most people in here probably never even seen it. There's a sign out by the highway, but you have to drive up there to see it. But those are kind of my concerns with that, and it's just, when I was on the planning board, this has been years ago, we looked at the same thing, and it was the same problem. You have people, that's your, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's pretty much the value when you live on that highway. Who wants to, come in and buy a house, at full price when you're living on a 5-lane highway? I mean, I could understand if it was Ray Hill Road or whatever road. I don't need the name of the road, but if it was a back road or something, it'd be different. But when you're living on a 5-lane highway, that's going to be, you're going to kill people's property value with this rezoning thing is what I'm afraid of, And I can understand buffers on the highway to keep it from looking, or whatever, which you already have landscaping buffers in place. As far as I know my business down here, I've had to do a lot of landscaping buffers and stuff to make things happen, but those are my concerns. Are you guys going to address that tonight anymore, or?
Yes, sir. Tonight and as long as necessary,
Okay,
because this is, it's a big step.
it is a big step.
And we need to be
they
very
sent out a little
deliberate,
card
very-
like this. You guys probably saw it, but that card's it's pretty hard to understand. You know what I'm saying? It's a small card, and I'd like to see a bigger blown up map of what your, the plan is and all that stuff. And it's like it's nitpicking certain areas, you know what I mean? And we got a neighbor right up from us that's has a big landscaping business, so it would really affect him too, I'm sure. And just a lot of people around there everybody on 280 pretty much would be affected, I think. But that was my concerns.
Yes, sir.
Come and voice them. I wished I would have got here last time, but I'll hang around and listen out.
Well, thanks for being here this time. Okay. And, Stephen, no, teach out. I would, okay.
Just take a
step. All right, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. first comment is that I broke my tooth, so address the elephant in the
Oh,
room.
bless your heart.
So I'm fixing it tomorrow. My name's Stephen Teach. I'm here for public comment on the Brown property as well. I own a company called Ocean 10 Security. We recently purchased the Miles View Ranch right next to the Brown property. My company, we're what do we do? We manufacture a surveillance system that we sell to the military, NASA, and police departments around the country. We have a real-time crime center. We're in Asheville, and we purchased this property next to the Brown property to move our headquarters out of Asheville and into Mills River, which is our new home, our new corporate office. Excited. We're just going through the planning as well. First thing that we did when we landed at the property is we reached out to our neighbors. Brandon was one of the first people that we reached out to. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. Shake your hand, and if you need anything, call us type thing. So I'm here to get more information on the Brown property. I've reached out. They haven't reached out to me. I own 90% of the land that adjoins the Brown property, and so I would essentially be the most affected by this. And so it would be nice to have the same respect paid back and introduce, knock on my door, and have a conversation. So that would be helpful. Outside of that, the product that we manufacture is the Tsunami. This is the planning board, I understand. But it's my job as a CEO to be a steward of the community as well. So it's my purpose to introduce my company. If you need anything, that I'm here to facilitate that at no cost, forever. We are in Asheville, and I have not been a steward of that city for the reasons that they don't align with what we do. Our job is to solve crime. So hence, welcome to Mills River. So this is twofold. Really appreciate having us as a new guest in your city, and looking forward to what we're going to do in the future with the town, and essentially how we can help. We reduce crime about 80% in the cities that we get into, and that's from Los Angeles to Guam to Miami to Detroit. It's been quite a journey, but if you need just something for the parking lot, give us a call. I'd be happy to help. But thank you. And the one thing I think Brandon requested it as well as the site plan. I'd like to see the site plan to see. I own the easement that goes through the property, the Brown property, that will essentially traffic the commuters into the property. But yeah, I'd like to put my eyes on it. See if that would.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Malachek, we have some email. Do you want to read that?
I'd be happy to.
I
if
can,
that's all
okay.
right.
Would be very grateful.
So the first emailed public comment we have is from Jimmy Cowan. Thoughts on development in Mills River in response to current proposal of rural residential zoning. Hello, Mills River Planning Board members and members of Town Council. I am Jimmy Cowan, a resident of Mills River and live off of Presbyterian Church Road. I'm not originally from Mills River, but have lived here since 1997. I appreciate all of you giving your time to try and make a positive difference in the future of our town. I'm a strong believer in personal property rights, but realize that we have to plan and have some ordinances in place to try to maintain harmony in a crazy world. I am very much a supporter of agriculture and rural living. With that said, below are a few points I would like to make. 1, we can't stop growth. We can manage it a little, but we can't stop it. If we could stop it, would we want to, or should we want to stop it? We all live on what used to be vacant land, someone else's land, maybe farmland or forest land, but whatever the case, was once raw land and a pretty view or privacy for others before our own house was built. What if restrictions were in place that prevented us all to live where we currently do? We are in a very desirable part of the country, very close to a growing regional airport, 2 major interstates, a popular national forest, and many other regional attractions. Growth is inevitable. 2, let's humor ourselves for a minute and pretend Mills River can lock the gate and not let anyone else in. We have 2 main corridors coming through Mills River. Those are Highway 280 and Highway 191. If we don't grow at all, every town around us is still going to grow. which will continue to increase traffic and activity on these two main corridors. Most of the traffic from Brevard, Rosman, Toxaway, travels through us to get to and from anywhere outside their own community. Number 3, commercial development pays the bills. We have to have it to survive unless we want to become an elite community with very, very high taxes for everyone. It's a fact businesses pay much more in taxes than they require in services. Without businesses, we'll all need to pay much higher taxes as Mills River grows with residential development. Don't take my word for it, do the research. As stated earlier, I believe in personal property rights, but I'm passionate about agriculture and believe in preserving our rural character. If we don't allow businesses along the Highway 280 corridor, where will we allow them to go? The 280 corridor makes the most sense to me. We can rid many of the people passing up and down 280 each day of their excess money, helping businesses to thrive while providing those same services they are providing to outsiders, to our local residents. 280 is set up for truck traffic. Lights can be added to slow traffic down, manage access, etc. Our rural character and farmland can be preserved on the side roads and back roads away from the main corridors. I think about going to places like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home to one of the largest Amish settlements in the country. I love to drive the rural back roads and enjoy the scenery as a tourist, but the main road is full of businesses. Those businesses serve tourists and locals alike, but 1 or 2 streets back, the rural character is preserved. This makes sense to me. I argue the opposite of what the planning board is thinking to be true. I support the development of the 280 corridor for commercial growth where businesses are already established, and for good reason. I support preserving the rural character and farmland of Mills River away from the 280 corridor unless individual landowners wish to preserve their rural character and residential living through voluntary efforts of their own. We must remember that if someone along 280 wishes to preserve their land in agriculture or open space, they can do that through voluntary means other than the town making them do it by law through ordinance. It just makes sense from an infrastructure standpoint, maintaining harmony with residential development, keeping farm equipment off of the main roads as much as possible, and promoting the safety of residents to put our businesses on the 280 corridor. They can thrive and carry much of the tax burden for the town without filling up the schools and the park while begging for a swimming pool and a bigger soccer complex. I also predict that if a recommendation is made to restrict commercial development along Highway 280 to the current council, and if the council enacts this, that sometime in the next 10 years, a future council will reverse the decision and see the error in their ways. A couple questions I leave you with. 1, if commercial development is not allowed on the 280 corridor, where do you want it, if at all? Who is willing to pay the bills for all of the residential growth without supportive businesses? We need good businesses and they need us. It almost sounds to me like someone bought a house in the Mills River Crossing subdivision and then realized, oh, expletive, the developer is saving the 280 frontage for commercial development, and I just gave a $1 million for a house that will look into the backside of a strip mall. I hate it for that person, but buyer beware. My thought is plant more tree buffers and be careful next time you buy. Don't penalize us all for your mistake. 2, why not allow commercial development up to blank number of feet off Highway 280 and then residential development beyond that? Number 3, if we want to preserve farmland, which I am 100% all about, allow other commercial businesses to go where it makes the most sense. Let's face it, land along a busy 5-lane highway is too valuable to farm anyway. Some of it is being farmed because of multi-generational ownership, but absolutely no one is buying land to farm along the corridor. There is no way to ever pay for the land farming to farm it at today's prices. The math just doesn't work. I love the idea of preserving farmland, but some of it just can't be preserved unless taxpayers want to support agriculture through a special program that makes it profitable to farm some land where the highest and best use isn't agriculture. One other aspect to consider, whether we like it or not, 280 will look like Airport Road on the other side of the interstate, even if not developed any more than it is now, just to handle the traffic passing through as other areas grow. And will it be safe to be on a tractor with wide farm equipment in the middle of that? Number 4, if I can't change your mind, will you please at least consider allowing existing businesses to grow their footprint as they grow their businesses and not stifle what they already have started and worked their lives away to gain? Thank you for your time, and please consider some of these ideas. I apologize I have not been able to make it to a meeting Dealing with this, I deeply care about the place I live. More than that, though, I care about my neighbors and the great people I call friends here. Jimmy Cowan.
Okay, thank you.
Got three more here.
Okay,
Yeah.
see, we
Hello,
call a
Mr. Malachek.
5-minute recess if you'd like.
Yeah. A little water. Hello, Mr. Malachek. Please express my concerns at the town hall meeting concerning the possibility of changing the zoning on a stretch of Boylston Highway that includes my property location. My name is Robert Michael Stinson, and I reside at 8106 Boylston Highway, Mills River. I have lived here for over 8 years, and the current zoning allows me to continue a used car dealer license, an operation I have operated for over 26 years. I first had a location in Brevard for approximately 17 years. Changing the current zoning would not only destroy my livelihood, but also the value of my home. Let it be known that I am strongly opposed to any zoning change. Please make the comments known at the meeting. Your consideration is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Stinson. Third, Mr. Malachek, I wanted to take a moment to first thank you, the Mills River Council, and especially the Mills River Planning Board for the great meeting on Tuesday, July 23rd on the rezoning being considered for parts of Mills River. The meeting was very educational, and we got to see what great leaders we have representing our residents. I request you share this note of thanks as well as my comments below with both the board and council as they consider this important change. My wife and I started visiting Mills River back in 2013, and we fell in love with the rolling hills and the undeveloped feel of the area. Had we wanted to live in an area with more housing developments or a quote-unquote Main Street, we could have done that. There are plenty of communities like that. We chose Mills River exactly because it wasn't that, and we were fortunate to find land, a former dairy farm, back in 2014 on Toll Allison Road, and have since built our home on the property. When we first received the postcard, it was like Christmas. We were so excited that the leaders of Mills River recognized and listened to the residents about minimizing future housing developments. We quickly responded to the survey and attended the meeting on July 23rd. I will not rehash most of the pro-rezoning comments here. I believe you heard folks loud and clear, both in the survey and that evening. My only additional comment is in regards to the minimum acres needed for homes. We all agree that we will grandfather current residents' properties and ability to build. If a person bought 1 acre years ago, they should have the right to build a home on it. My fear is that the recommended future minimum of 1.5 acres isn't enough to deter developers from coming in and building large developments of houses, which totally destroys the feel of our community and creates so many other infrastructure issues, roads, schools, etc. I would love to see this much higher, like 3 to 5 acres per home, but I do understand a compromise is needed. Perhaps consider and discuss raising to 2 or 2.5 acres per home. I do believe this would accomplish our goal of enabling Mills River to retain the country, rolling hills, and farmland that it is currently known for. Thank you again for your time and for taking this on. Best wishes on getting this approved as soon as possible before more building begins that we cannot go back and change and that will be with us for generations. John and Michelle Newmeyer. Last one, number 4. Mills River at a crossroads. Billy Kinsey serves on the Town of Mills River Planning Board. Occasionally, he comes by to discuss issues facing the town with me, a community elder. This is from Jerry Britton. Currently, the Planning Board is faced with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to guide development from the NC 191 intersection to the Transylvania County line. I suggested to Billy that the challenge is to keep this corridor from helter-skelter strip development such as the US 25 corridor through Fletcher. I think the planning board should seek advice from landscape architects experienced in large-scale planning of mixed-use corridors such as NC 280. Currently, space exists for the creation of a linear parkway with nodules of residential, commercial, and professional offices separated from the main thoroughfare by tree-lined frontage roads. Time is rapidly running out for this opportunity. A great example of this kind of corridor may be seen in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, a rapidly growing suburb of Charleston. The charter for the town of Mills River contains the lofty goal of guiding growth and development in a way that preserves the rural character of the community. This goal amounts to having the cake and eating it too, and is especially challenging in a community with little appetite for zoning. To achieve the goal will require members of the council and planning board to place the future of the community ahead of political careers. Several years ago, Christopher Alexander and his students at the University of Oregon developed a group process for seeking consensus on controversial issues. They named the process Pattern Language and published a book on the topic that is now a classic in community planning. Following are some statements that might find agreement among the stakeholders in the NC 280 corridor. We would like for the corridor to maintain its rural character. We would like for property owners to be well compensated for land required for public use in the corridor. We would like for growth and development within the corridor to consist of a few high-density nodules, such as residential, commercial, and professional. We would like for the corridor to have a tree-lined parkway appearance with limited access thoroughfare. Journeying on, Jerry Britton.
Okay. Thank you very much. Since everybody came out tonight to be with us, is there anyone who didn't sign up who would like an opportunity to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Chamberlain, and do I tell you where I live? Is this one?
Yes, please.
I live at 93 Solomia Drive. So I had a question about our development that's having a lot of water issues at Mills River Crossing. And my concern is that it changed hands from Henderson County to the town of Mills River after the permits were approved. And after that rain we had, like, well, probably the third week of July, one of the homes had water up to like a foot below the door handle. And
Wow.
so my property butts up to some of the storm, like right next to the ravine. So actually the old Britain farm is my backyard. So the stormwater structures are right beyond my property. And when I saw the guys out there looking at everything, I asked if they thought they would have to build a like a retention pond where the common space is. And they said, no, I think we're gonna have to change out the pipes to bigger pipes. Well, the Brick Rancher was sold from the Britons to a nice young couple that have a 3-month-old baby. And they were not told that their driveway would be impassable during heavy rains. They can't get in or out during heavy rains on that driveway. So, and I did go by and I told them that you had tried to get a hold of them. It wasn't them, it was the Britton family, because they don't know anything. They didn't know anything about it and they haven't been reached out to. So if those pipes get changed out, that water's just gonna flow faster over their driveway and their problem's gonna be bigger. And so here's one of my questions. I owned property in Deltona, Florida, which actually is one of those research towns about what happens when you don't allow enough commercial property into a town. Is exactly, they ended up going belly up. It was the same guys that developed Marco Island who developed Deltona, and it ended up having huge financial problems because there weren't enough businesses. So that is something to look at. But anyway, in that town, I bought on a lake after a court case had been won by the development, because when the lake was put in, the adjacent neighborhood started getting water in their living rooms. Now the homes, similar to the old Britain Rancher, it was a pre-existing home and then ended up with problems that weren't there before the development was there. So when they determined that the lake had to be connected to the surrounding lakes and reservoirs to be controlled, a resident said this shouldn't be on the taxpayers, this should be on the development. Well, I was now a homeowner or in there just as this was getting settled, not knowing it was happening. And the court deemed that because the development was was built according to the specifications that it was the county's issue to cover. And so my question is, with it changing hands, the county approved it, but now the city, or now the town of Mills River is now over the jurisdiction. Who would help us? Because this almost changed hands to the residents before this rain. And now it's clear that we're not okay. So if that could be worked out on who's, like, would we be dealing with the town of Mills River, or would we be dealing with Henderson County from that?
That's a great question. And with us as the planning board, the way we can help is in the future as working with town staff to make sure that, stormwater erosion control is, definitely up to the codes and meets all the standards moving forward. The way things stand now might be, and I don't want to pass the buck on to town council, or even town staff might can give you some answers. I'm not sure exactly how we as a planning board could advise you. I do know the property. I knew the Britons very well, grew up with the family. But as far as, advice, yes, sir.
We're aware of the issue. I've been in touch with both the downstream properties and the upstream properties and the developer about it. Again, the county permitted everything because they had the watershed authority at the time, and that was passed off to us.
Okay,
So the town is responsible for closing out the project. That means collecting easements, having as-built engineered drawings of all the stormwater infrastructure, and that's not been completed for some time now. So the development won't be closed out until the town has reviewed all of those documents and made sure everything was built to plan, but we're waiting on the developer to provide us with that.
okay. All
But
right.
I would say if you have questions, find my contact info on the website and get in touch with me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. At this point, we'll close the public comment. We'll move to old business. And we have a request for a conditional rezoning that we're going to discuss again tonight.
Thank you, Chair. So we're revisiting conditional rezoning request R2401. This is for the Brown Ridge property, and I'm just going to kind of summarize the everything for everyone here. The applicant has prepared some slides they want to share with you as well. So again, I'm happy to answer questions after I'm done, but the applicant has some stuff they want to address to the board as well. So this application came in April 1st from Northwood Raven LLC, who's acting as an agent for the current owner, Tilton B LLC, which is Albert Brown, Mr. Brown. There's 3 parcels, but the main parcel is 232 Brown Ridge Road. And again, the request is to rezone from light industrial to Mills River Residential Conditional District. It's about 74 acres of property, and there's a single family home on it now. They're allowed to do this special conditional rezoning process because they're 2 acres or more in size, and they fall into one of our future land use map designations that allows for this process. So again, the planning board started consideration of this item at the June 4th meeting. We were going to table it to a June 18th special meeting, but then that was canceled by consensus of the board due to attendance issues. Myself and Mr. Foster at the June 27th council meeting did ask council for additional time for the board to consider this item, and that time is granted with no time limit. So don't feel like you're under the clock to make a decision on this immediately. So again, light industrial district provides for light industrial uses. The conditional district, and just for those here, this is basically where the developer is writing a specific zoning district for the property and development in question. So what they are proposing is a multifamily development being a permitted use in up to 65 residential buildings, up to 290 dwelling units at a density of 4 units per acre, plus customary accessory buildings and uses, clubhouse, leasing office, and other uses and features shown on the preliminary site plan, master plan. All other development will be in accordance with town requirements, except for the following, which are modified in their proposed conditional district. And I won't go through all of those, but those are in the staff report, and we went through those last time. There's some deviations from setback requirements by 10 feet. and parking setback requirements by 10 feet. Everything adjacent to the property on the northwest and west is all light industrial, and the adjacent properties to the south and southeast are zoned low-density residential MR30. So like we talked about last time, this is not consistent with the future land use map since it designates this property for employment uses, and the applicant is proposing residential. But again, we heard from Mr. Brown and I think some of the applicants that the property is very difficult to develop for industrial because it can't be mass graded because of streams, topography, et cetera. And additionally, since conditional rezonings are often going to include flexible mixed use developments, it's maybe common for these developments or conditional rezoning applications to be inconsistent with the future land use map going forward. So although it's inconsistent with the future land use map, staff finds that the proposed district is consistent with the objectives of the Making Mills River 2040 comprehensive plan. Those are outlined in your packet. And again, the rezoning can be recommended for approval just based on that plan consistency. Since we are looking at one parcel rezoning it differently, I always recommend we do the spot zoning reasonableness analysis. So again, when it gets to council, there's a formal reasonableness statement that's adopted by them. But for the planning board, just to consider in the record, size and physical attributes of the site, compatibility with existing comprehensive land use plan, benefits and detriments to the landowner, the neighbors, and the community, the relationship between the proposed uses and the current uses of adjacent properties, why the rezoning is in the public interest, and any changed conditions warranting the rezoning. So again, staff is recommending approval, specifically with the condition that the developer construct a southbound left turn lane on Fanning Fields Road, Miles View Drive within the existing road right of way, and that they provide a pedestrian connection sidewalk to the intersection with Broadpoint Drive and NC 280 for future connection to the Mills River Valley Trail. And I'll end my summary there. Happy to take questions. The applicant's also available to show you a couple slides as well.
Okay. Do we have any questions, Mr. Malachek?
Sorry, you said the applicant is here?
Yes, and they have material to show as well.
Okay, the applicant would like to come up. Yes, well,
Thanks. It's nice to be back. Good evening. My name is Jesse Swords. I'm a land use attorney with Allen Stahl and Kilbourne. And we have the team here again. We have Kyle Whitaker and Anthony LaRocca from Northwood Raven, David Coslett, land use planner and landscape architect with RVI, John Kennard, civil engineer with CDG Engineering, and Andrew Bryant, the architect from 505 Design. I am proud to associate with this team because there has been a lot of homework done on this project, a lot of consideration, very fine detailed consideration of the site and the topography, and the residential buildings themselves, the buffering, the streets, all of that. This is the first, potentially the first CZ in the town of Mills River, the first CZ application. And the main point from last time is that this project provides great benefits to the town in terms of additional housing stock, raising the tax base, and responsible development goals, while minimizing the impact on the town's character, and that has a lot to do with its unique location. I did hear the public comments. We are happy to discuss the project in detail with the neighbors. And you can just find one of us after the hearing. And, again, we have quite a team and we can answer any question y'all may have. One thing I do want to, point out for the neighbors is, comparing this to the light industrial use, is something you should keep in mind. When you're thinking about what could be built here, what we're proposing, And that is just because of the nature of the current zoning. So I can go through the policy points, the comp plan points quickly again, if you like. Otherwise, I have a couple of exhibits to share. Last time y'all wanted to be able to ask questions of the architect. We have the architect here. You wanted an exhibit showing a rendering of the project from the bridge on 280. And that's one of our exhibits. So I will ask David to come up and discuss the cross-section buffering exhibit he put together. And then we'll have the architect up to talk about the rendering and how that was created.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Coslett from RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture. Pleasure to be here again to talk to y'all. One of the concerns that we had and one of the main talking points that we talked about quite a bit last time was visibility from the main roadway 280. So we did put together some initial cross sections on some of our tighter points within the site plan, trying to represent our proposed grading versus the existing grade and how there will be a significant amount of existing vegetation that will remain in between the Boylston Highway traffic lanes and our residential development. So as you can see in two of these cross sections, we're showing on the far right, we're showing where the cross sections are taken, where we do, like I said, our tightest points where our residential comes up against our property boundaries, and then a representation of what that existing vegetation would look like as we kind of continue to keep existing vegetation in those buffers. So what we're kind of showing here is we're almost 20 to 30 feet of vertical separation between Boylston Highway and our proposed grade on the residential, right? So there's a significant amount of vertical separation as well as horizontal in the fact that we are set back as a good ways from the actual travel lanes. And then based on not only what we're doing from a land planning perspective, but also the existing vegetation within the right of way, there's going to be significant screening, as you can see in both of these renderings. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys had seen that, because that was definitely something that we spoke quite a bit about on our last meeting. Absolutely.
For all of us, as a reminder, and the group that's here, show the aerial site plan for this.
Yeah, Jesse, is that?
You click through, you'll get to
I think everyone sitting here is probably going, what the hell am I looking at?
No,
So
all right. So
there you go. And if you
yeah,
can orient them to, it's not on there,
there a
but the
pointer?
280 bridge. The bridge
Yeah,
over
so
the
the
French Broad is just northeast off of this map, guys.
and so we are showing, and I'm not sure if I can really get to a screen that I could point to, but we're showing two cross sections. The first one is really here, where we have one of our buildings within 20 feet of the property boundary. This is where the right of way actually comes as far into our kind of development as possible, and then we're showing another one kind of through this water management area. In both situations, there is significant amount of vegetation in the right of way. And then even in some of these other cases, we have existing vegetation on our property also. And again, we're talking about 30 feet of separation, 20 to 30 feet of vertical separation between Boylston and where our kind of finished grade of the pads those houses would be.
Thank you. Now that's just 30 feet, 20 to 30 feet off.
20 feet vertical, so up. So our elevation of the existing highway, and then our units will be 20 to 30 feet above that.
Can you go back to your cross section?
Yes.
So if you look on the cross section there, he has the triangle coming in
There we go.
at an odd little angle. In the upper right, you'll see that. That's because that's what the right of way does from the DOT.
Yes.
It's not a straight line. It's not a curved line. It is zigzag like crazy.
And
Last
that-
time
and
we
that's-
met with them, we brought up the point of, hey, the closer this gets, what are you going to do to artificially skirt this, or I'm sorry, curtain this?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the trees you see there in the lighter green we'll add those.
The lighter green is kind of in the background, so
Right.
the darker green is kind of in the foreground. So that's what we're kind of showing. And again, I'm going to come over here.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That same triangle that he just showed on the other map.
Our line of cut, right? So the trees that you see in the dark are really the trees that are within the right of way here that are gonna be actually in that cross section. The trees that you see in the light here are the trees behind that you're seeing as I look this way in the cross section. So these would be existing trees, really screening these buildings as it continues down. We will provide buffering also, per town code, anywhere that we do not have existing vegetation along our property boundary.
So, on Boston Highway, I know you're talking about vertical, 20 to 30 feet you set up. Horizontal, total, from the apartment building to the highway, how far are you talking about? You're asking for variance, right?
Well, we're asking for a variance only on the top version. The requirement is a 30-foot setback and we're a 20-foot setback on that top building from property boundary.
So those people living in those apartments would be 20 foot from the traffic on Boston Highway.
They'll be
right?
20 foot from the right of way line, which is significantly separated from the actual travel lanes of Boylston
I
Highway.
don't know what the right of way is out there.
It varies greatly
It
right there
varies.
as-
I know.
in relation to the actual road. The road is not centered.
Yeah,
It isn't
I
at
know.
all.
See if I can get back to my plan.
that's pretty close for all the truck traffic that's gonna be out.
Yes, you see it pretty,
not
good.
worried
They've
about it.
put screening up and it's growing and
I'm not
they're
worried
in that
about seeing
process.
it. I'm thinking about those people who might live in those, units, the noise they're gonna have.
that's their problem for the rent. I mean, no, I'm sorry. That's,
Yeah,
that's not the planning board.
it's not the, yeah. Yes, sir.
Sorry, these two maps are useful to toggle back and forth.
Absolutely. I don't mind going back and forth.
The right of way here is what the DOT calls a controlled access right of way. And it's
Right.
purchased, it's fee simple, it's actually NCDOT property. And so a lot of times your property line will go to the center of the road. In this case, the property line is at the beginning of that right of way. It's purchased. And it does have funny shapes out there because when NC 280 was built, it required property parcels. So they may have taken someone's whole property. Well, their property had that V in it or had a bend or whatever. They just took the whole parcel and it didn't make sense to carve off, a tenth of an acre or whatever. So that's why the property line does that. Generally with DOT, they do maintain the shoulders of the road to a point away from the road, then they'll let it grow up. They'll, as to whether or not DOT has the right to come through and clear cut this. Having been a district engineer at the time when the decision was made to clear cut it, I'll say I'd rather, I'd rather try to put my cat in a bucket. It's not fun. So DOT is very careful about how they work with their right of way, in a situation like this. Now, I can't make promises. Again, I'm not advocating. I'm just saying that's how this type of right of way works for the most part. DOT generally leaves it alone until it starts encroaching on the road. Then they
Correct.
may come trim it back or do something like that. So in effect, whether or not we choose as a board to consider that additional buffer, chances of that being clear cut up to the property line,
So
say
Michael,
it's
can we ask you a question
pretty-
here?
pretty rare.
Let's say it is clear cut. What's the county's landscaping? Jerry referred to it. If he's still, well, you're still here. Someone else referred to it. We do have the landscaping buffer there.
Yeah,
and
no, the town does.
The town does. Can we get a quick 2 bullet points on what that looks like? If, let's just go worst case scenario, it's clear cut by the DOT. What would be our requirement?
Evergreen trees every 20 feet, evergreen shrubs every 5.
So what Amazon's doing right now in an immature stage.
I wasn't here for Amazon. I
Okay.
don't know if they
Okay.
followed that to the T.
And I don't know that either.
Yeah.
I'm not making a mistake. But, so that's what it would be in this. And we could, as a board, recommend even more restrictions beyond that because of the conditional aspect, correct?
That's at the board's.
But we can't have that conversation
Conditional zoning allows flexibility to those standards.
Okay, I'm encouraging you to think about that. One of the biggest balancing acts in this whole conversation that's tied into the rezoning, it's tied into the future land use map. everyone has said, what about affordable housing? What about affordable housing? Supply and demand doesn't have any affordable housing. And this is an opportunity that I was a hard line against this when I first saw this. I just cringed. And then I thought, wait a minute. This is an opportunity for some affordable housing. So I'm open-minded right now.
Yeah, we had,
So I really want,
Yeah.
I really pushed back on them about the site, what we see from 280 though. I don't want 280 to look like Arden.
Was it not very limited affordable housing though?
Well, they're holding title on everything here, so their rent's gonna be a supply and demand, but they've done the math on it and their square footage was, and I'm not holding them to this, but roughly in the $1,600 average.
For-
When they did their.
4 or 5 of them, maybe. It wasn't many, was it?
But, well, the different sizes were, right now, we're comparing that to a $4,000, $5,000 mortgage
Mhm.
in this town. So
Talking
the
about
conversation about affordable is very relative and it's painful even at its
Yeah, it
lowest
is
mark
really
right now.
relative.
Well, affordable relative to what? But
Yeah.
anyway, we mentioned before, as far as what the rent would be. And I believe the figure came up with, at that time, we would be talking about $1.65 a square foot. So I believe one of y'all mentioned
Yeah,
it
that was-
before.
Is that right?
And I know that can change. But, so how many square feet? I assume it's gonna be some one-bedroom apartments. How many square feet will be in a one-bedroom apartment?
You want to speak to that?
yeah, either way.
I can speak to that. Good to see everyone again. I'm
Thank
Kyle
you.
Whitaker with Northwood Raven. It'll vary in size. Our typical one bedroom is gonna be anywhere from 750 feet to 850, 900 square feet for one bedroom. And then we'll have in this product,
Well, I know you're gonna have one bedroom, two bedroom, and three bedrooms.
that's correct.
So average is probably gonna be two bedrooms.
It's a pretty good mix at this point, and we're still trying to dial in that mix on the number of one versus two versus three bedrooms.
Say if a two bedroom was 1,200 square feet, then we're looking at pushing $2,000 a month, right?
It varies, when we looked at it and talked before, our kind of average per square foot was about $1.65 a square foot. So that kind of varies depending on the product type.
Again, my experience in property management, the smaller units are gonna have a higher per square foot price. Actually, than what you're doing, your larger ones are gonna have a small, an overall larger rent, but a smaller per square foot. Right.
And how
That's,
many,
his average is not gonna go up with the square footage when you're only talking square foot, price per square foot. It won't go up the way you're.
how many
anticipate.
one bedrooms would there be? Do you know yet?
I think in our current plan, we
I was
had
thinking,
roughly 80. That
that many?
may change plus or minus a few here and there.
Right. Yeah.
I had a question on the rendering.
David, sorry.
Dave,
We'll bounce
sorry about
back
that.
and forth.
Let me come on.
I
back.
didn't get to
Teresa,
jump in ahead of Brian there.
No,
so sorry
no,
about
you
that.
didn't. No, you didn't.
I don't want to get in the way.
This is a big one for me. I don't want to see big buildings
Absolutely.
from everywhere.
The distance between, on the bottom rendering, between Boylston Highway and the property line, do you know roughly what that distance is? Because that's the narrowest part right here, correct?
The distance between, Boylston and the property line, is that what you're
Right,
saying?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna just base
That's
it off of
fine.
that 10 foot. I'm gonna say 10, 20, right to, are you talking to the actual travel lanes?
yeah.
Probably 60 feet.
Okay.
And that's to the property line, and we're not planning on getting anywhere close to that in most places, other than the one condition that we're showing on the top where that property line comes jutting in significantly.
That's where the 20-foot setback.
And that's
variance
where the
is
20-foot
requested.
setback variance is because of the fact that we have a little ridge there from a topography perspective. And based on the fact that there's just so much existing vegetation there.
So for our part in this, they won't like this, but we could say, no, you're gonna get 30 foot off, you're gonna get 40 foot off. It's conditional. So I'm just telling you guys, keep an open mind in this. This isn't as black and white as that some of the conversations. He said it, this is our first CZ. This is the first one. Michael, if I'm not mistaken, we anticipated situations like this being the request once we got them when we created conditional zoning, correct? It wasn't gonna be the individual homeowner. It was gonna be a developer with a larger scale.
That makes sense because it's a multifamily development and this is
Right.
the only process for that now.
It's it. So we anticipated the conversation being around this. We just didn't know when it was happening. It got here quick.
Are the height of the residences, relative to the height of the buffer or the tree line there? Do you anticipate while there's that buffer, would the roof line be above the tree line?
In certain places, there's certainly a possibility that the tree line, the top of the housing will be above the tree line. And that'll come down to our limits of clearing and, you know, what our final proposed grades are. So there is a potential that you'll see the tops of housing.
And while you were moving through the slides, it looked like you had a rendering from the bridge.
From the bridge, yes, ma'am.
Could we see that?
Yeah, well, that's why we're here.
I still have questions on this, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay.
No, go ahead. That's all right. We'll go
We-
back.
I'm just, I feel like the view, where this rendering is, if you're in a vehicle from the road, it seems like this is not where you would see.
This doesn't exist. This is a cross section. You can't see this, but the perspective from the bridge is a line of
That's the
sight.
perspective
Right.
that actually is the one that is gonna make a difference to any Mills River resident driving down 280. That's where you're going to either see this or not see this.
Well,
It's not from that.
Yeah, and I'll be
point.
quick so we can look at that, because I agree with you. I think when I pass that every day.
Yeah.
I'd like to see as much of that, continue. So keeping Jeff's cat in the bucket, in mind.
Scratch. I got
So,
scars.
Scars.
It concerns me, but anyway, so they could clear cut that, obviously the DOT could. So what we need to consider as a planning board is what buffer we would like to see from the property line in, because we can't control what the DOT does, correct?
It's correct. We
Okay.
can't control.
And Michael's
They do
answer-
listen to public input.
Can I ask a quick question? Now, would we only be required to put in the significant, I'm guessing you're gonna ask for a much bigger buffer than what's required of us. Is that only if the right of way gets clear cut, or is that something you want in place day one? And I'm just asking the question.
Well, I mean, I just brought up the subject. I mean, if I had to answer the question right now, and I'm one of 7 people, I would say that if you have a narrower buffer, and you build, the townhomes there, and then they clear cut it, we can't change the buffer at that point, right? So I would think initially you would want to create a buffer, with the thought that if the DOT does clear cut that, we've already taken that into consideration. I mean, that's just a thought off the top of my head.
Sure.
so.
Would that be with the type of vegetation going there? Maybe instead of the shrubs, more trees?
Yeah, and I think to Lisa's point is, well, trees grow higher than shrubs, so you know that, but, and because again, if I'm rounding the corner there and I see as much of what I see right now, I hope there's a ton of homes behind there, because again, it's supply and demand and the cost of rental units and homes and stuff like that. But I'd like to see as much as possible of what's there right now, knowing that part of that is the DOT right of way. But what if? Again, you can't go back if a home is built within 20 feet of the property line. We can't go back and change that if the DOT clear cuts it. Again, keeping the cat in the bucket in mind, but they probably don't want to do that, but
Right. But there's no guarantee
yeah.
there.
And so that's a quick answer to that question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this was something that you wanted us to plant before
I would
and
think- I would-
planning for them to potentially clear, or if
I
this
would
was
think that
something
would
where.
I would think that would be the right thing to do
Sure.
from our standpoint, as far as the look of it and the rural feel or the rural nature of Mills River. But it's only right from your standpoint to say, here's what we would require, so you could adjust the plan, accordingly. So.
There could also be a trigger in there. If that happens, it's so unlikely to happen. Where's the DOT clear cutting along our roads? Nowhere. They're not doing that anywhere in the state. Driven down to Pinehurst, if Matthew's still over there. Those trees are just lined solid.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You got to move it somewhere. So that's why I think there does need to be talk of a trigger. And can we see that perspective now?
Yeah.
From the bridge? So there's your rooftops, Lisa. So the elevation, the 2030 rise is further up. Obviously, and this is why it can't be used for any large scale light industrial as it's currently zoned. You can't grade down there towards French Broad.
And there's jurisdictional wetlands
can't,
all
yeah, you
through
can't.
that
The
stream
utilities,
system that
that
runs
there's
through
a-
there.
So I'm not saying we do this because of that. I'm just saying its current zoning makes little sense.
is all set back from the current, the open space that's like along the Ridge Road right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring the plan back up if you don't mind, just to kind of talk through that. So, this is. As you're seeing there's the river and then the open space where you always see the horses running around. And then there's existing vegetation and then our development would happen behind existing vegetation. We did that for two reasons. One, the slope there is significant as you start to get past where we have development. And then two, it was also to take into consideration the screening and the buffering from the views from 280.
This like in your current mark schematic right here.
Yes,
Is that all the existing?
those are existing.
Incorporate any additional?
The only trees that we're showing that are proposed or are the little trees around the houses and whatnot. If we're showing large swaths of trees, it's based on existing vegetation and limits of grading.
Now, are you proposing to build a bridge across Bridgeport River?
No, sir.
No, that was.
I didn't think
No,
that.
sir.
So that's that coming down here and going, that would tie back into Boston Highway down there.
Are you?
The-
I'm-
the
I'm
dotted
not sure
lines.
where we're actually looking. Are we talking?
The dot on the right,
Yeah.
on the right.
Oh, that's a,
Along
an
the river.
easement, isn't it? That's an easement, like a
Yeah.
sewer easement or a,
That's the sewer easement and
That's the sewer easement.
that's the power and the sewer easement, yes.
Sweet
Does
too.
it have a pointer on it? Oh, okay,
Holds the top.
gotcha.
it's high tech.
So I think that didn't work. All right, so I think what you're talking about is this area. Oh, we lost it again. We're gonna get this technology stuff done. All right, I think what you're talking about is this thing here, yes?
Yeah, that's a sewer easement.
That's actually the FPL easement, I believe, or not the FPL, the Duke Power easement that goes through there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And there also is sewer down there and a couple other things. But that's gonna be all kept in open space.
Conservatory status.
Yes, Matt, that's okay. So that being open space, if it's on these plans are approved through conditional zoning, it has to maintain open space. You can't go do anything else. Is that correct, Mr. Malachag and Mr. Swords?
Yeah, that's a good way to characterize it. With conditional zoning, part of the process is being bound to a particular site plan. And all of the open space, that's shown here, the existing vegetation, landscape stuff, will have to be, according to the town code, but, pretty much as you see there. And because of the conditional zoning, if any of that area is really buildable anyway, because of the watershed concerns and things like that, it couldn't be done with this, with this site plan, this project.
Just remember as well, this is just a preliminary plan, because the applicants are using that process versus the final fully engineered plan. So if they do get approval for this master plan, they have 2 years to come back with the fully engineered plan, and that goes to the planning board for review and approval to make sure it's consistent with this. So I'm just mentioning that because if there happened to be a structure or some other development in that area, there would be another opportunity to look at that.
But for the most part, it's the preliminary plan will show the number of units, the general location. It's not going to be fully engineered. You're not going to see elevations. You're not going to see specific stormwater features or anything like that. That has to come. But it's enough for us to make a decision that this is what it's going to look like. You can't go change to flat roofs or anything like that. It's pretty much an agreement. For the most part, you may, as you get deeper into the weeds of engineering, there may be some things that will have to be tweaked here and there, but then we have the opportunity to see that again.
And I do want to point out further that because of the complexities of this site, a lot more engineering has been done for this particular project than you might see elsewhere. To even get to this stage, a lot of homework had to be done.
Okay.
There was a rendering at the last meeting that showed the varying heights of the unit.
We have, is it
We have-
just
we have
another
the-
bird's eye?
We have the whole presentation from last time.
It's in there.
After, yeah, you're in it now.
Okay.
You can click through it unless,
I think this was the one you're trying to talk about. Yeah.
But Mike, in this process of. But I guess that's for you and, what's the rate?
Mhm.
Would you want to know what our thoughts are on the buffer we were talking about earlier, our thoughts on what the buffer should be?
So I mean, again, the planning board's role is to make a recommendation based on the conditional district. So if there are additional conditions or standards you would like to see, again, now would be a time to probably discuss that. So council can consider that in their decision making.
That being said, that one location where you're asking us to vary the buffer requirement, that should be visible here, correct?
Upper right.
Upper right, that corner?
There's actually two.
Okay,
The-
and
it's
lower
The
up.
bottom right and then a little bit further up.
So the question is, can we go from a 30-foot to a 20-foot there? Allow that? And those two locations, not the whole property. And would it be written into the zoning that only for those two locations?
I believe it is currently, but, and again, we're talking about building setbacks here from the property line. So
Building
again, the
setbacks.
standard code is 30 feet off, and I believe the applicants requested 20 feet off specifically for that one
Specifically for the
multi-unit,
one building,
the one at the lower right of the screen.
correct, which we also showed in that cross section.
Right.
Yeah, and the conditions as drafted reference the site plan for this sort of thing. So it would not be a blanket reduction. It would be as shown on the site plan.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant?
If you like, we could,
Sure.
we could have the architect explain the rendering from the bridge and talk about that a little.
Sure, that would be good.
Hello, Andrew Bryant from 505 Design. Thanks for having us all. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. It was done in-house by us, based on a combination of the planning assets from RVI, the civil engineering assets from John Kinnear, and kind of open source GIS information. Sorry, I skipped forward. I think it was suggested at the last planning board meeting. That was a great suggestion. So we developed it based on that. I think, as has been mentioned before, we're looking to establish the neighborhood basically on the highland of the property. So those the steep slopes down to both the French Broad lowland, as well as the slope down to Boylston Highway, remains with the existing vegetation. We've tried to represent that accurately here. There's a couple little stormwater management things that David pointed out where there's, additional impacts. And so we tried to give people a good sense of what the community would look like from Boylston. So happy to take any general questions about either this view or about the architecture in general. I will say that, right out of the gate, Northwood Raven came to us with their thoughts, and it was to do, what in terms of the rezoning process constitutes a multifamily project, but we would consider from an architectural standpoint, a kind of a gentle density project where we tried to maintain a very residential character. From an aesthetic standpoint, we want to pay honor to the rural and agricultural heritage of the area. We're looking to use, high quality materials. I know there is the Boylston Highway overlay, which covers a portion of the property, but the intent is that we're using the same materials throughout. It'll be probably a combination of lap siding, maybe some board and batten siding like you'd see on some farmhouse or barn or agricultural structures. We tried to keep the aesthetic, traditional kind of streamline forms like you would see in a rural farmhouse, kind of clean lines, plenty of, natural light in the units. So, I give credit to the North of the Raven team that they came to us with, some ambitious goals in terms of creating a vibrant community here that would align well with Mills River as a community as a whole. So, but happy to answer any questions there might be.
Looking at this here, I assume you're talking, this is the existing bridge.
Yes.
Okay. You're gonna have if this is approved, you would have a main entrance somewhere here.
No, it would be, the two entrances would be off of the Amazon kind of service road.
Can you bring that aerial up for this conversation for the crowd especially, please?
Okay, you'll be feeding into the road that goes up to Amazon.
Yes.
Two existing.
There's already
There's already,
That's what I think.
there's already a lighted intersection there that we would be tying into.
that basically would be your main entrance, right?
Before and backwards. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And
Some
then
of our
on-
public comments revolved around line of sight for traffic, sound of traffic, airport noise coming through, the adjacent properties, our, Butler Bridge traffic, from, the schools was one of the other questions we haven't gotten to quite yet, but this showing the main entrance. And of course, if you can point out where Miles View Drive is and what that would be used for this development, because there is our Miles View Farm man is still here, I believe.
Well, Miles View Drive would have to be redone completely, right?
Right there. I'm not sure what the plan called for improving it was that part of the proposal to improve Miles View Drive, guys? I'm sorry, I didn't remember that one.
Oh, no, I can speak to
Thank you.
Miles View Drive and address the public comment
Thank you.
earlier. Right now, there's an easement in place that allows access to that. As we were going through planning, we heard from our brokerage team that there was a potential buyer for the other site. Haven't had a chance to meet them, but for the purposes of this, we kind of left it as is. So would love to catch up afterwards. Left as is, just kind of not knowing where everything was with our conditional rezoning, getting ready to go in and them in the process of purchasing, but definitely open to having those discussions with them to figure out what works best for everyone through there. But right now, it does maintain its current shape.
Okay.
And then to speak a little bit to kind of the overall thoughts and design, how we clustered things in the middle was an intentional one from the topography of the site, but also really trying to maintain those perimeter buffers and edges. So some of it's natural with the stream. A lot of it's dictated by topography as well. But, you can kind of see kind of everywhere along the periphery, we tried to keep those natural buffers to the extent that we could.
What was the name of the main road to the left of Amazon from 280?
Broad Point.
Thank you.
That's, yeah, top one,
Thank you.
that one there.
I can't see it. What's the next
So leasing office amenities and associated uses right now.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
not residential
have-
up in that area.
screens here.
So Miles View, as shown, is not going to be widened. I remember the traffic impact analysis showed some traffic on Miles View. It's how wide is it currently? It's going to have to be improved at some amount. It's going to have to be in order to take any traffic, unless it's one way. And I apologize for not remembering right off the top of my head what the TIA said on that. What's
And I don't remember off the top of my head either, but there is, a TIA has been done. And it's in the materials, for anyone who would like, to read it. It's in the materials on the Mills River website associated with this meeting. And we have also agreed, to the staff proposed condition related, the turn lane condition. And just briefly to address, the other, questions that were raised, we discussed schools a little bit last time, I think. That, this is an unsatisfying answer, but under North Carolina law, that's, the sole purview of the school board. It's not a consideration for zoning. Generally, more students means more funding, which is the good news. But it is entirely up to the school board to plan, and all of that. It's, under case law has decided it's not a proper consideration for zoning. As far as the change in the airport noise, I don't know that, any simulation could, tell us what might happen there, but I want to point to the efforts to maintain as much existing vegetation as possible. Also, there are lots of buildings, which don't absorb sound quite the same as, a full tree canopy, but it's not like there's now a straight line, from the airport directly into the neighbors' homes. But again, the extent of any change, I don't think we can know that. I wouldn't expect it to be large, if any.
Mr. Moore.
Compare that to an industrial use, which
If
it's
you look
currently
at,
zoned for.
yeah, and if you look at Amazon, not that same thing could be built on this parcel, but you got flat parking lots, you got flat roofs, you got, not a lot of obstructions. I'm no sound engineer, but I would think the residential development is better than the Amazon development for sure in that respect.
So what about landscaping along Miles View and along, I know we talked about it because we have to along 280, but some of the concerns brought up sight lines for traffic and noise lines for traffic, where Miles View comes in the south corner of the Amazon parking lot. That landscaping around that southwest all the way to the southeast perimeter could definitely contribute positively to some of the concerns we heard.
Yeah, and you see the trees kind of along there,
Mhm.
and then you see the existing vegetation, being retained on Miles View.
To-
I don't know if there's a full landscape plan.
Well, there's not anything that's triggered as far as I know from Miles View, correct, Michael? We don't have a landscape trigger on a secondary road, a collection road.
Correct.
So, but a conditional zoning, this is the flexibility we have though. We can listen to these people right here and talk about landscaping. That south, all the way from the southwest to the southeast.
On our property.
On your property.
And
Yeah, we
my-
have the easement. I know the owner of that easement is here and, maybe there's talk about moving that further to the southwest. I don't know. I don't know if that is his property all the way over there. Maybe talk about moving it. I don't know that yet, but I do know that landscaping will help, obviously with the sight lines. But also
Miles
with the
View,
sound.
Yeah, and all the vegetation that's being shown there is existing.
Existing,
You
correct,
can
right.
you can see it if you pull up Google Maps. You can see
Right.
that it's there, and so, I mean, one practical question is, where would the landscaping go? Cutting down trees and planting buffer, generally is, not what.
No, it would have to be some type of trigger. Keep it natural as possible, but if for some reason that were destroyed or removed, and I don't know what that reason would be because it's not worth talking about because it's pretty unlikely, then it would need to be, recovered.
but Miles View, there's you have a right of way, an easement to access this property through part of Miles View to the west of the property. Does that make sense? Where there's a turnaround, then the road comes from the turnaround southeast, then it hits the property line. So you definitely have a right of way to there. But that's got industrial uses on both sides. But if you needed to widen Miles View, if you discuss with your neighbor and it's widened, because if the neighboring property has an easement through there to use Miles View, then it may benefit you both to bring that up to a standard of some sort. And then unless it's topographically unreasonable, you might want to straighten it out. That would give you some room for some buffering there. And so there's a lot of things there that, could be looked at.
The existing vegetation is going to do a much better job. of
Agreed.
buffering
Yeah.
than anything that we're going to plant.
Immediate.
Immediate, right? So, and, to Kyle's point, we've kind of left Miles View Drive somewhat alone in this plan based on having to go through the CV process and knowing that there was something happening with the adjacent property.
So pleading ignorance on this question, genuine ignorance, is the DOT not going to require two forms of ingress and egress?
It wouldn't be the DOT, that's usually the fire marshal.
Okay, so two, is it two for this many units?
I would think so. And I
So is
believe
this
you've
Miles
got
View
to-
wide enough for ingress and egress for that volume?
generally
Is there
it's
someone in your?
a
that
hard
could-
surface roadway. Now that's my time in Asheville. It's got to be a hard surface, an all-weather roadway.
Has someone in
however
your
that's
group
defined.
Looked into?
So I don't know
Huh.
if we know the precise answer to that, but, this is something the fire marshal will come and,
As we go through our permitting, that roadway will most likely need to be upgraded.
that's where I'm
in
go- I-
order To provide a second access.
I
for
agree.
Emergency.
Totally agree. I don't
Would it be-
anticipate that looking
yeah.
like that.
No, I don't either. Right now,
Okay.
it's a pretty much a gravel road.
Correct.
So.
He's the owner of the easement.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, if you would, we'd be glad to,
We
if you got
appreciate
some
doing-
information.
On the purchase, so Miles View, when I did our research, there was a 20-foot easement that was in place. Then when Pepsi expanded, they expanded to a 40-foot easement. DOT came in and said, well, we're going to require a 60-foot width just for the purpose because it terminates at the end, that asphalt just past Pepsi. So they needed an easement in order to turn the fire truck around. I requested so at some point in the future, I will be coming to this planning board for our expansion as well. I have reached out to them. I haven't got a phone call back, so it would be nice to talk. So it would be my intent to have a 40-foot easement right through the vegetation directly into our property so we can conduct our business as that home was rezoned industrial. And so there's just a path essentially going to this property. And we would in the future request an actual 40-foot easement. DOT didn't recommend or isn't recommending a 60-foot easement like they did because they do have the turnaround, but that doesn't necessarily affect my property, but they would have to do their own research on their development, how that terminates.
If I can just jump in real quick, I just wanted to inform you that the property was never rezoned to light industrial. It's still low density residential. So I just wanted to bring that up so you're aware of that. Okay.
And I want to point out that, we're saying the term easement, we're saying the term right of way, that those two things are slightly different, used interchangeably sometimes. They are usually not the same as the road width, in general. Fire departments require, something like a 20-foot wide drivable surface, maybe 25. Down here, it's the fire marshal has a lot of discretion. But in any case, that will be something that would be fully, fully studied and fully understood by the time we get to the later plan review before this board.
For the board, just a reminder, the reason I'm bringing it up isn't because I care what the road looks like. I care about the buffer that's on the Regal Knolls and our other residents. That's what I'm bringing it up for, because I feel the road's probably going to be straightened and widened, and we're going to lose some of that natural vegetation. I think the conversation to the citizens over here is to just keep it as private as we can on that side as well. I'm not so worried about Amazon, even though I know they have that.
Mr. Moore, can I
Yes,
answer
sir.
your question from earlier?
Please do, yes.
So the traffic impact analysis allocated 35% of the traffic to Miles View Drive and 65% to Broad Point. Miles View Drive, just based on my GIS estimates, The main stem of the road that I think is built up to DOT standards, about a 40-foot wide pavement section right before the cul-de-sac where it narrows down, and that's 60-foot right away.
Well, I think that pretty much settles it. Miles View is going to have to be improved. It's got to be. It's got to have a 2-lane cross section. It's got to be. Otherwise, the TIA is not valid. So you can't have a 1-lane gravel road and have 35% of your traffic on it.
And that's something, you know, again, that will be part of the later plan review. It's also something that we could study and see how much certainty we can get on it before we go to town council with this.
Sounds good. Okay, discussion, or you got anything else?
I was just gonna add on the buffering piece along Miles View, and David and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but if along Miles View, because that is a property boundary, if for whatever reason we decided to remove any of that existing tree canopy, we would have to plant that back per the buffer standards.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, accurate.
That's what I'm looking for. Thank you for that. And it was Andrew, the architect. Do you have any street rendering or perspective from the street? I know that's a lot to at this
Not-
point, this
not
early on.
today.
Okay.
Happy to follow up if that's the consensus.
It's okay. I mean, I know you guys have the shrubs there. I don't know if, you know, if you, if it could, a perspective, you know, a 5.5 foot off the ground perspective for sidewalks, brush, doors, changes. I know it rolls in there. I know it's too early for that, but I thought I'd ask.
Okay.
One more thing I do want to mention about the buffering we're talking about along 280, you know, DOT clear cutting is a, you know, a future unknown concern. If it does happen, it's likely to happen sometime in the future. And that will give the landscape buffer that we do have to plant time to grow up. So the good thing is if, you know, disaster were to strike and DOT decided to get the chainsaws out, the buffer on the property would have time to grow before that happens.
Can you put up your cross section again? Because I wanted to clarify a question. It was, since you're going back to that. So in the upper right diagram, that is added buffer
Yes.
on that line,
The
but
little-
that's the actual property line to the DOT's right of way.
Correct.
Okay.
So where you're seeing the small little green circles.
Right.
Those are trees that we would be planting on our buffer.
So this
because-
is what Jesse's referring, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
It would be planted now.
Yeah.
It
So
wouldn't be as oh no, they just cut down the trees in their right of way. Let's plant some trees.
it's gotta
and
be
so
planted
if
now.
I can get this to work there, that's where the
Just set
required
inset.
landscape buffer is up there. And there's also, I believe, landscape buffer shown here. So both of those things, you know, would be planted when the construction happens and would have time to grow up to become, you know, the screening we actually want.
Right. From that particular point, whoever drew that elevation, you can't see anything from your upper left diagram. Picture yourself in the car looking up, you can't see anything right there. The bridge perspective is a little different.
Okay. Board discussion.
To the crowd out here, I'd say something if you don't mind. Just want to
Part of your
know,
discussion.
you've heard us say light industrial. This isn't, we're not in some corner where we have to do one or the other. But that keeps coming up because it can be improved upon as light industrial. It's not ideal because the slope is just not friendly, but in theory, a small industrial complex could be put there. With a lot of, you know, a lot of asphalt for parking lot. It's unlikely, guys, but that's
It would be a
it's
small.
allowed by right
Mhm.
now.
It
Right.
would be a small complex on 74 acres.
Who would not be so friendly with preserving. That's just the nature of that industry. They're not going to be that friendly on that. I'm not saying that's imminent, it's not, but it's allowed by right, and I just wanted
When
the
you say
public to
allowed
know
by
that
right now, we're talking about light industrial.
Light industrial.
currently light industrial is allowed by right. In other words, we can't stop them at all. That's allowed. So it could be near clear cut if they wanted to go there.
They just have to follow the buffering standards and stormwater
I'm
and
not trying to go the scare route on this. I just want them to know why we keep bringing that up. Thank you.
Sir, if you'd like to comment.
Yes, I have a few things I want to comment on. As mentioned earlier, we recently approved this conditional rezoning. That's why we're here tonight. And our understanding and was what we were talking about, that this would help maybe longtime residents of Mills River, if they had some property, maybe they wanted to rezone a small partial to a child or a grandchild or something to build it. This would work out, but this is not what I expected. We're here today. This is the first application, of course, for possibly 290 apartment development with high density. And asking for several setback variances from what we already have. And if I understand it correctly, most of the adjacent property is zoned MR, light industrial, which I feel more in line with the goals of what we want to maintain in Mills River. And I think from listening to the voices from past meetings and tonight, that, in my opinion, is probably as far as what we want to see Mills River should remain zoned as is. But I'm well aware that the property owner would like to maximize the sale of the property, and I think the town of Mills River should assist him in any way possible. Mills River already works with and supports various economic development organizations, and I would strongly suggest that the town work with these organizations to keep this property zoned as it is and quickly find a suitable facility for this property. And one other thought comes to mind. Mills River recently adopted a land preservation initiative. This would be a great opportunity to look at ways to preserve this property and allow the owner to still have use of it without destroying the landscape of Mills River. Just think, 290 apartments. That means probably close to 600 additional residents to Mills River, greatly increasing the traffic both in and out of Mills River daily and probably overloading the already operating to capacity schools, which I know we discussed, and we don't have any say over that. The school board appropriates the funds, but where does the funds come from? Taxes. And also additional residents will create more demand for services, which creates additional cost. And of course, more taxes to pay for everything. I'll have to say, sometimes I don't think bigger is better. I think we can all agree that Mills River wants and needs some workforce housing for our teachers and first responders. But I don't see that this proposed development would come close to filling this need. Would love to work with some local owner developer on a small scale development of this type, residential. And one thought that just came to mind, and I'm just going to throw that out there for what it's worth. I would like to point out, it seems that the government has taken on the idea of distributing millions of illegals throughout the nation. Just look at what has happened to cities all over the nation, where they have moved in and completely taken over hotels and other facilities to house individuals, even schools. This would completely destroy Mills River with the additional crime it would bring here, as it has in other areas. They want to come in and take over the whole thing. Just stop and think about that. And I've done a little research on some of the neighborhoods that's been affected by this type of action by the government. So our neighborhood once was considered one of the more peaceful and fashionable parts of the city, has found itself beset by violent crime, increasing violence and civil upheaval as the city moves to establish a mega shelter to house thousands of illegals against the will of the residents. And we have to be heard, is what they say, and that's what I'm glad the people are here tonight. I'm reluctant to mention this because I'm so emotional about it. but I want to point out that most of you, I'm sure, heard about the nursing student that was murdered on the campus of the University of Georgia, walking their walking trails, so they have some nice trails. The reason it struck home with me, my granddaughter is on that campus. She just finished her master's, or not recently, but she was shortly will finish her doctorate. And I was thinking, what if that would have been her, walking those, we have some nice trails, Mills River, and we don't want to bring those kind of people, or even create a possibility that those kind of people could be here to prey upon our residents walking the nice trails that we have. So that, I just wanted, that's my opinion of the whole thing.
Okay, thank you for that. Any, I'll say that, my bride and I, who's sitting in the back watching to make sure I behave, she and I had supper with a good friend last night who would very much like to live in Mills River. She can't. Where's she gonna live? Can't buy land. It's very difficult. And so it comes back to one of the problems we have is a shortage. I said this last meeting, I'll say it again. My children are grown. One of them doesn't live here. She may want to come home someday. The other one, don't know where he's going to want to live. But, if I didn't have my property, if my daddy hadn't bought it and left it to me, where would I be? Because it's hard to find a place in Mills River. So housing, supply and demand. Even when you look at the price of rent and we say, oh my gosh, I could get a house for that. Well, no, we can't. Because, when was the last time we've refinanced? So giving a place for people to live and be Mills River residents and of all walks of life and from wherever someone wants to come from and, however, I think is important. An affordable place, and even if it's not affordable, what we would think affordable, just the increased supply does tend to make things more affordable. So then the property, as I look at this, what would someone build there? This is my reasoning. It's, I'm one vote. What kind of an industry would go there? Well, it would have to be big enough to afford 74 acres of 74 acres of industrial property and yet not be able to use most of it. Because to build a large warehouse, you got to flatten it. Look at Amazon, it's flat. Look at across the street at the what used to be Continental Tevis, Broad Point. It's flat, clear cut and flat. So the chances of this being used for its current zoning, in my opinion, is probably pretty low. And I'm sure that our property owner certainly researched that as part of his diligence to decide who to work with and what to go here. So then that leaves it, okay, well, if we need more housing, where's a good place for the housing? Yes, Butler Bridge Road is a busy road at times when school, yes. We've got a TIA, traffic impact analysis, talking about how to manage that traffic, including a turn lane. This is on the outskirts of town. This isn't in North Mills River near the National Forest. This isn't South Mills River. This isn't Highway 280. This is the outskirts of town. This is right on the very edge. If the town limits were to the west of this would be done. I'm sure the county would allow it. But still, what keeps Mills River? Well, once you get past Amazon, get past Broad Point, get past those areas, we do have a more rural area. This area, right next to 280, I don't think is that rural. So in my opinion, if a multifamily home, and if I understand they're townhomes, not apartments, which implies a different level of ownership or renting or than an apartment building with 75 apartments in a building. So in my opinion, if we're going to have it, this is the place. I think that the traffic question's been answered with the traffic impact analysis. I think the school question's been answered by something we can't really consider. Having had a principal come in here and talk to us before about a development, the principal saying, bring them, we'll handle them. And I know that's difficult, and I know that's, that was the principal's opinion. I know it's difficult with the schools, but that's my opinion. I would be in favor of the project. I don't think it's going to be an eyesore. I don't think people are going to rent apartments that are eyesores. So I think it's incumbent upon the owner to keep it from being an eyesore. I think it's going to look, it's going to be shielded by the buffer, definitely the controlled access right of way. I think the traffic's going to be dealt with. We've got a traffic signal there at Amazon. I think most people are going to use the signal. So, like I say, I would be in favor of it for all those reasons. That's my thought process.
Planning board approving the rezoning or approving the project? I mean, recommending approval.
Question.
My opinion, with a conditional zoning, we actually do have some input on what goes there, correct?
Yeah, so you're recommending approval for both through the same application, because the conditional rezoning.
Do we have to recommend approval for both to the town? Would we recommend conditional rezoning without approving the project itself at the moment?
But the what?
Without approving the project itself?
Conditional rezoning requires a
Yeah,
specific project, or
it's a
it doesn't
site-specific
exist without
development
it.
Plan, so they kind of come
They
together.
they have to.
I can address it a little bit if you like.
Sure, please.
What the planning board's role in this process is spelled out by statute and by the town ordinances. Your role is to evaluate this according to the comprehensive plan for reasonableness and for consistency with the town's goals. It is not it is supposed to be based in the comp plan, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But we could make a recommendation for a more conditional zoning as far as the buffer. We can, this is called conditional for a reason. Conditional is things that we think protect the public. So, and we've discussed that. I think we need to come up with an idea of what would be a safe buffer in case they do rebuild a bridge, just like they're doing 26 with broad areas all along, and you never know if if they would have to cut out that area. So, I think we need to include in the condition of a more buffer.
And that's at the board's discretion. The staff report has the suggested condition of the turning lane and the pedestrian connection. So obviously the board can consider additional conditions as part of your recommendation to council.
Okay.
So would that additional buffer require more of a setback? Or, I mean, we generally, when a site plan is created, you put the buildings where they pretty much have to go. So it would mean losing one of the units.
And I do want to point out that a condition or a suggested condition from the planning board could be something like that we study, the buffer requirements that you've recommended and bring a proposal to town council consistent, we have to look at feasibility and all that stuff. And that we would come to town council with a proposal for an increased buffer. It could be something like that. It doesn't have to, you don't have to spell out exactly what the buffer would be. And I don't think it makes sense to do that here without, what I'm proposing, which is a little further study on our part and a proposal to town council.
Okay.
An assumption from the last meeting I might have made, Jim just brought up, have y'all closed on the property? No, okay.
Have they?
Sorry?
Uh-uh. No,
No, I'm sorry. They have not. So
Oh.
you made a comment that made me think, wait a minute, you know, so have they closed or not?
Well, and with my opinion, if we could work something out with a little more buffer there, I was concerned about, you know, how many of the units might be accessible for affordable homes for working force people. And y'all brought it up that you mentioned that there would be up to maybe 80 one-bedroom homes. So that's a good percentage of them. That's a lot more than I originally thought there would be. So I feel a little better about that.
and most likely the one-bedroom homes, they're not going to have children. So the impact on the schools would be it's not like 290 families coming in with 2 kids each. It would be less. It's hard to speculate the number, but
Michael, can I ask your statements and your opening comments were that you found it to be consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Correct.
Could you just expand on that for us?
I think it says that it's not inconsistent, which isn't the same as being.
All right, our resident attorney is correcting. my-
So
Not
the-
inconsistent.
Well, what I've identified, and again, this is in your draft planning board statement of consistency, which if you do choose to move forward, the board would discuss and adopt that. And
The
again,
very
this
last
is-
page, M.
this- Yeah, last
Okay.
attachment. And again, this is always a draft recommended by
Understand.
staff. If the planning board feels things are not consistent with staff's recommendations, or there are other things that are consistent with the plan, this is always, can be changed. So what staff found is that the development is consistent with element 1, element 2, and element 4 of the comprehensive plan. And I'll just read through these so everyone can hear. So objective 1.1, managed growth to meet the goals of the comprehensive plan and provide for the efficient use of land to accommodate new development. Objective 1.6, land designated for specific uses, policy 1.6.1. Maintain zoning districts and associated use requirements that supply an adequate amount and diversity of housing types to accommodate anticipated housing demand. Objective 2.2, variety and mix of housing types, policy 2.2.1. Allow for a variety of housing types, including single-family dwellings, apartments, multi-unit buildings, townhomes, condominiums, accessory housing, and manufactured homes. Objective 2.8, availability of workforce and affordable housing. Objective 4.3, expanded tax base and long-term fiscal responsibility. Policy 4.3.1, promote development that expands the tax base and assists in sustaining the financial position of the town. Policy 4.3.3, assess tax base and long-term fiscal responsibility considerations and all changes to the zoning elements of the Code of Ordinances and all updates to the comprehensive plan. Policy 4.3.4, establish and maintain zoning categories and land available for development that will ensure the long-term fiscal health of the town.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So I would just ask you 1.6. If we look at that, it talks about maintaining zoning districts and associated use requirements that supply an adequate amount and diversity of housing types to accommodate anticipated housing demand. So I'm going to cloud it a little bit with bringing up the other half of tonight's meeting if we don't delay that. And that's the rural residential zoning application. And we're talking, and I wrote down five different groups where we have talked about maintaining rural culture. I'm sorry, retaining the rural culture. One of those, Lisa was on with me, was the Farm Preservation Board, which is our committee, I'm sorry, which is rolling out soon now that we have the new town manager in place. The Mills River Rural Residential Zoning, which has been created by the council. And we're talking about changing usage allowed according to the future land use map. We're doing all of those things that are going to make higher density building less likely everywhere in those areas that we just talked about. We hope people preserve land or farmland. We hope we're buried in applications over there. My point is the town's making a concerted effort to decrease density and slow down some of the usage. One major objection that's come up by everybody who's thought this out even a little bit is, oh crap, where are we gonna live? Where's the affordable housing? And we keep going back to that is relative. At current market interest rates, average home in Mills River with only 10% down is almost a $4,000 mortgage. That's average. So I see this as an opportunity to help overcome some of those valid objections of, hey, you're talking about preserving farms and preserving green spaces and reducing density, making the buildable lots go from, 30,000 to 1.5 acres. This is an opportunity in an area that is not designated rural residential, to Jeff's point there, an area that is surrounded by industrial. It's at the absolute outskirts of the town. They're not going to build on the other side of the river in the airport runway or approach, I'm sorry. I see this as an opportunity to offset some of the other objectives that the town has put a massive amount of effort into. One of the biggest accomplishments former Councilman Randy Austin had was creating that farm preservation, and it's coming soon. So where are we going to put people? And I think this is a little bit of a trade-off. I really feel that when you're trying to balance all of those things, and the meeting we had 2 weeks ago or last week, I'm sorry, that it was Mike and I were over here making notes like crazy, like always. It was about 90% in favor of reducing density. This is something that's a give back, and it's in an area that already, I think it fits it. When you read through the statement of consistency, I believe I'm listening to you, Michael, and checked off every one of those in agreement with you. So if anyone needs a minute to read through those again, I'm not saying I'm ready to approve this, and I know our group over here doesn't want to hear that tonight. I'm not saying I'm ready to recommend recommend approval. But I think if you think about what I just said there with the trade-off, this is a big objection that we're creating by trying to preserve green space. This is a big, I think, Jim, you mentioned, couldn't we partner with the developer for affordable housing? No, you can't build an affordable house, a single family home, the way you're picturing there. We can't. 1,500 square foot homes are going for over 300 square foot. We can't. That math isn't there. This is an opportunity to help people. Maybe this isn't the right forum, but I would caution you on how we word some of the things you said, sir. We need to be open. We need to talk about the density and the usage. But who's between those four walls probably isn't the conversation for this board. That's all I have to say, sir.
I think one of my thoughts, I agree about the need for the workforce and affordable housing. And I like the point that you made about the trade-off between, lower density, less uses, and needing to then be able to have a place for higher density housing. I don't know, where today's numbers are. I wasn't here for like the Mills River property development, but one of the things that I have heard, and may or may not be true, but is that was originally intended to be affordable housing. So I think that, to say that this would be or will be 2 to 4 years affordable housing, it may not be. And then we can't, so I think it's a tricky thing for us to say that this will meet that demand for affordable housing in 2 to 4 years. Or whatever it is, I don't 1 to 3 years. I don't know what the forecast for when the people would actually be moving in, but there's no way to know that's what this will be. And I don't know that 1-bedroom housing is where our nurses and our teachers and our firefighters are living. I think often they are people with families. teachers in particular are often, you know, one half of a family that is, so I don't know that a one bedroom apartment is really meeting that niche either. So I would just say that it's something that, well, I agree with you for the need. I don't know that this is actually going to accommodate. what
Lisa,
it
can
is.
I
Yeah.
give 2 cents? So, in my opinion, what you said is going to be relative, whether it's a year or 5 years into the future. It's all going to be relative to
Sure.
that. If you've gone to Fletcher or even to, wow, go out 64 east of Hendersonville, you know, these apartments are popping up everywhere. These guys are long-term holders. And I'm not defending them in this, but I want to explain, they're going to buy the land, they're going to develop it, and they're going to manage it. The renters of the property. They're going to build whatever's in the highest demand to get the return on the investment that their investors want. That's what they're going to do. So when they get deeper into that and they decide that that ratio of 1 bedroom to 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms needs to adjust, it's going to adjust. They're not building those for vacancy. They have an occupancy target and they have to hit it. So demand, everything I just listed falls under the demand, the supply, and demand will balance out to a relative, you know, more affordable than our average house. Our average house in the county is over 500. Mills River is well above that. Relative in the future is my comment for you there.
That's again, that's kind of what happened with the Mills River Crossing development. It was all
Sure.
relative.
Why sell it for less when you can sell it for more? That's just, yeah, right. It did. Yeah, the rising tide raises all ships theory here. That isn't going to be on an island increasing in value. Right? The apartments that I just mentioned in Fletcher and the east of Hendersonville, and the ones that are already permitted with the Henderson County and Hendersonville, the permits are through the roof. They're going to keep each other balanced for whatever that demand is.
Any more comments?
The school thing, if you don't mind, we are not allowed to shoot something down because we think the schools can't handle it. We're just not allowed to. But it doesn't mean we can't make phone calls. So I spoke to school board members this past week. I spoke to county commissioners. I spoke to principals. They're well aware that we're overburdened. Everyone's well aware of it. The furthest out they can plan is permits. And they're 6 to 12 months away from permits on this. And then they're a year out, or they're however far out, right? From breaking ground, I'm sorry, from occupancy. Unfortunately, that's not something, we're behind on that. Unfortunately, the county does not make a practice of, I'll call it holding real estate. They don't buy land to build a school in 10 years. They wait until they needed a school 10 years ago. And once it's 10 years old, everybody goes, oh crap, and then we go find land. So unfortunately, that's not a proactive stance. And maybe our new incoming county commissioners will see that different. Encourage you all to call all of them.
Thank you.
Was there not a lady at her last meeting on the 23rd from the school board?
Say that again?
That lady that was at her meeting, she was with the school board lunch.
Call public information, call all of them. Call every one of them. They're not going to change what they're doing unless we show up like this.
Are we at a point where we feel a motion would be in order, or?
I do like what Jesse said. As a reminder, we don't have to have a specific recommendation on buffer. We can,
But we need something in there that
well, remember, we're only recommending to town council anyway.
on the condition that there's a safety buffer. is
I
what-
agree that, but part of that may be less of a definitive description as an objective from 30,000 feet, what we're trying to accomplish. And that's privacy, sound, and sight on as many sites as we can. And it push the council, and I don't know what that verbiage would be to push the council. I know Mike has thoughts on this, though.
No, I mean, it's light industrial, we need housing, we've been, back and forth and, free market, it's hard to, create affordable housing other than supply and demand, right? And it's the supply, I agree with you there. My only concern is that we recommend both, but we still have, to your point, Lonnie, uncertain conditions that we would then follow up and recommend to the council. And I don't know how to approach that, I guess. I know, I don't remember your name, and I apologize.
Jesse.
Jesse Swords. And, you know, this board does not have to recommend everything that, you know, council ends up deciding on, which is why I suggested that y'all add a condition for us to, you know, study those buffers and bring a proposal to town council.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I know enough to know all of the things that we would want to study, so I don't know if we would have, you know, a recommendation that said we approve the conditional rezoning as well as the project Northwood Raven. And then this one buffer condition to be determined later. I would rather, I don't want to do something where I can't pull that back. And I trust Mike, I don't know you, but I know you represent Northwood Raven. I mean, how do we word that, Mike, so that we're open to then following up with, for the developer as well, obviously, the various conditions that we'd like to discuss and come up with, but how to continue to move the ball, you know, forward. Then we don't need to even know all the conditions that we might want to recommend to town council yet.
Just as an example, when council considered the townhome project on Jeffress Road, it surrounded two existing single-family homes that front Jeffress. And so one of the conditions council imposed there was a double buffer. And so I'm just throwing that out as an idea. Currently, if you look at the conceptual plan in your packet, there is that 10-foot perimeter buffer basically around all sides of the development. And I think I'm just not seeing it on the south side. Because again, this is a residential use, and then this, can't remember the security firm's property next door is still zoned MR30 low density residential, so that's also a residential use.
Is that J, attachment J? I'm sorry, Lisa and I are scrounging, trying to get on that page.
Yes, attachment J.
J, so southwest all the way
Pull that
around
up,
doesn't
Kevin.
have the 10-foot, but it is labeled on the
Yes.
west, northwest, and
So there is a minimum 10-foot buffer on the northern, western, eastern, not eastern sides of the property. It's not currently shown on the southern side. So the planning board could consider that the property has to have that 10-foot buffer on all sides. You could also consider that if something is cut or if there's a visibility issue, that maybe council consider a double buffer. That's where you'd have the 2 rows of evergreen trees planted 20 feet apart, but so they overlap. And that's just for consideration. And then to Mr. Cole's first question about, you know, how do you approve this? Again, the rezoning is the development. So if and when you do make a motion, you're just going to be making a recommendation for the conditional zoning and the case number. Now, again, the other document we're looking at.
That's what sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought that's what I was asking earlier, but you were saying we would be recommending the conditional rezoning as well as this project.
That's right, they're together.
Yeah.
But it's all under that conditional zoning application. So again, if a motion is made, you would just be recommending whatever for conditional zoning R2401. Because again, the project goes with the rezoning because of the site-specific development plan.
Well, and I'll just, you know, I'll end my thought here. I'm just not ready to think that maybe we're overlooking something that we should consider as a condition. So I'm not ready to do that yet, because I would want to think through all the things that might be a recommended condition before we finally approve it. Other than this one.
The only other attachment I would pay close attention to besides the site plan, which was attachment J, is attachment F, which again is the proposed conditional district. So again, as part of conditional zoning, the applicant is writing their own zoning district specific to this development. That's where we talk about the uses. And that's where, again, we don't call them variances here, but that's where there are deviations or differences from some of our general development standards, like that 30-foot setback for that single building at the right corner of the site there.
And it
So-
may help to explain that, in a conditional zoning, the site plan and the approved list of conditions is essentially the zoning section of the ordinance that applies to this specific property. So, there's a section for MR30, there's a section for, light industrial that has these requirements. This would be, these conditions are based on the way the ordinance is written. And in a CZ, you may have some changes from the underlying MR30, but they're all spelled out here and shown in the site plan.
But under conditional zoning, you not have the opportunity to recommend a condition on any of these things?
So under the way it's conceptualized in state law is the conditions have to be
They have to be agreed to by both
Uh,
parties.
Right, I understand.
not only do they have to be agreed to by both parties, they have to be based on the comprehensive plan, and they have to be, you have to have some reason that you're looking at that this condition will mitigate the expected negative impacts of the development. I think we've covered from all sides the impacts. I haven't had my timer running on the amount of, hearing time we've had, plus the couple of months to evaluate. I think y'all have all the information you need. And, as far as the buffering condition, I would propose that perhaps it could be worded that we bring a proposal that is above and beyond the required landscape buffer, because there are spacing requirements and general, type requirements spelled out in the ordinance. And it's not hard to understand what's in excess of that. It's more plants, but based on, the site planning that has been done, I hesitate to say, oh, we'll look at double buffer because, the spacing, these guys are the experts, not me. But bringing a proposal to town council over and above what the existing ordinance requires is the way I would propose to word that.
Could we go back to the overhead view? Sorry.
What type of parking are you gonna have? Will it be asphalt, gravel?
Most of the units are self-parking with their own dedicated garages.
Now, that's gonna be pavement?
Yes, that'd be right.
That's, okay, that's pavement on top of that hill above the river. Let's see, what is it? Where does that bleeding oil run from, Lisa? Out of the pavement? Where does that oil come from? Where will it go?
Oh, I think it'll go down the hill.
To the river?
River.
Oh,
And we do have the civil engineer here who would probably be the best to
okay,
address that.
yeah.
Good evening, John Kennard with
Yes.
CDG. Could you ask that question again?
The pavement?
Yep.
That'll be on top of that hill, right?
There will be pavement on top of the hill, yes.
And where does the oil from the bleeding pavement, where does it go?
It will go into a series of treatment ponds in accordance with state regulations. We will treat for water quality the first 1 inch of rain from every storm. In addition to that, and above that, we'll also do detention for the larger storms to slow the water down. So every bit of stormwater will be treated coming off this site.
Off the side, okay, I was just wondering.
See on this covered area, you can see the pond.
Correct.
Up in the northeast.
And that's state regulation, that's county regulations, that's stuff if you don't do,
That's
you
correct.
lose your license.
Yep.
We don't want that.
And again, if this is light industrial,
Mhm.
there's going to be a ginormous parking lot on the top of this hill.
With trucks.
With-
Oh, you mean like at Volvo,
Like at Amazon.
Amazon?
Yes, and we will have to get permits for all that.
More parking than what there will be at these
They have
townhomes, right?
garages, don't
Yep.
they?
Most of these will be in garages, yes. There's only a few that are actually open parking spaces, and those are just in that central area.
Okay, so it'll be stopped from going in the river. Just curious. Go ahead.
Heavily regulated.
And now the buffers.
But they don't all work, Brian, and they don't all work now, and they are overlooked now. Everything's not guaranteed. Anyway,
We got to stop the show before we go on guarantee.
no.
So the buffers we're concerned about off of Highway 280 are between the property line and the nearest. So are we only talking about the place where it's, the setback has been reduced, or the whole property?
Beyond the road right of way, between that and the houses and structures, is what I was concerned about from 280.
So could it be written as a minimum buffer of, meet the minimum buffer? So if the property line gets closer and it narrows down, that one area where it's 20 feet, there's only so much buffer can go there. Right? We pretty much understand that, unless the unit's moved, which is really hard to do, or taken away, which, that affects what can be built. Then there's just one section where you're not gonna have as big a buffer as you can have other places. But in other places, we could require a double buffer of vegetation unless it's already there and not being cut down. So that just be preserved.
With
Existing trees count.
yeah, with natural landscape that's
Mhm.
already there.
And if the existing trees aren't double buffer width, then they would have to add some more, except where there's a building in that buffer, in which case, you can't really do that. There's a controlled access fence through there. DOT's got it fenced off. At your property line, there's probably a fence. In that one area would just a aesthetic fence or something, a soundproof. I'm not talking a soundproof wall like we've got on 26. That wouldn't make sense here. But just plus what buffer you can get, would that be reasonable? Although the house is going to be up above that, that the building's gonna be taller than an 8-foot fence, so that may not even do anything, but.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm suggesting that the conditions spell out how we study it and bring to town council is because this is a complex site. And I think it makes sense to, have the landscape architects, have the civil engineers look at what's feasible and what will actually be meaningful. And town council is the ultimate decider on this issue in any case. So it makes sense to study it and bring it to them, in my opinion.
Right. Now, this submission here, who wrote this up? I mean, did Michael write it up, or did y'all write it up together, or?
So the staff report was
I mean,
all Michael. The
Yeah.
conditions were a collaboration between.
So, I mean, just as it's written up, why could an amendment be attached to this that we want to see a safety buffer there along the highway in case the state cuts
And
the
it
tree zone?
it can be, and what I'm proposing is that we study the details of what that would look like and bring it to town council.
Would that be in
We're
our,
not saying that we will put in a buffer where there is no existing vegetation on our property line.
you're saying that?
We're saying that it's written in the documents. Because part of your code says to focus on trying to preserve existing vegetation. So part of why we designed this site the way that we did was to preserve existing vegetation along those buffers. Where we have these pinch points, we're already saying that we will put in that buffer. Now, if the board said that there should be a double buffer or bigger plant material, that's something that we can certainly talk about. But we're already spelling out that the entire buffer or boundary along 280 will be buffered, either with existing vegetation or with proposed vegetation based on current code, or whatever the board and council approves.
And you said along 280, but it also shows behind, it also shows the shared property line with Amazon,
I'm showing it along the Amazon, yes. and
all the
then-
way to Miles View.
And then where we have residential against residential, the code does not spell out a buffer.
Right. But one of the things we talked about was adding,
Along the south.
there you go, that has the double wall on the west and the north borders. If you can see that. There isn't one on the south or the east. The east is the river.
East is a river. I
So-
don't think there's any point in buffering that considering it's 60 feet down. from
The
the
south
ground.
one has been my big focus
Mhm.
for Regal Knolls and everybody else over there. And the pinch points on 280. And I don't know that we have to give a specific. You're shaking your head no, as you,
I don't
you
think we-
agree?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we can, I mean, we could say the first 20 feet
Sure.
from the property line must be vegetated.
Well,
And that's pretty much what the
Yeah.
buffer is anyway, but, you know, we could say the first 40 feet.
our recommendation to town council could be to consider a double buffer on the west and the south and from the bridge all the way to Miles View
Yeah,
or wherever we want it to.
yeah.
But the proposed conditions in attachment F, that entire page, 5 bullet points and the 2 on the next, are the conditions, the other conditions that we specifically, that is the zoning, right, Mr. Melichek?
Yeah, and it's titled proposed conditions.
F,
Just think of it as the conditional district language, the description.
that's attached to the land. That's the zone. It's its island, right? Okay.
Mhm.
You shake your head, yes.
And the staff suggested conditions will be added to that list. That's not on there now.
Okay.
And then, you know, for this additional buffer thing, you know, perhaps your recommendation says you believe additional buffering, you know, is needed to mitigate the negative impacts. And you have instructed us to, you know, study the details and bring a proposal to town council.
So just so you understand, you asked if we could add something. We could add a bullet point to these 7. I mean, one of them references their preliminary master plan. So those bullet points that is the zoning. It's all in one page.
Yeah,
Adding to that can be part of our recommendation.
okay.
That's the zoning plus the site plan is also tied to
Correct.
the
I
zoning.
pointed out the last bullet point references the preliminary master plan. So it's caught into it by that last bullet point.
So Mr. Malichek, looking at the clock and the time, I believe, would it be appropriate for me to poll the board and see? Or is that even a consideration here? That's more of a quasi judicial question. Basically, let me just ask, are we getting close to being able to make a decision tonight? Or is there anything that could change the possibility would change your,
That would just be,
Thoughts?
that would be in the form of a motion or not, right?
if someone wants to make a motion that we,
I mean, if nobody makes a
Postpone this.
motion, then it would move on to the next time,
if
but
someone wants to make a motion that we approve this, if someone wants to make a motion that we deny this.
Are you soft polling yes or no?
What kind of, yeah, I mean, we seem to have still some questions. We seem to have still some, reluctance.
I
So
would make a motion, and you want a motion,
the board will entertain a motion.
or make a motion, and we deny it.
Okay, we do have a motion to deny it. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion before we vote? Okay, so.
Well, so if we say nay to the motion, that just leaves us back to where we started.
that leaves us with the opportunity
To
to
continue to
discuss it
discuss.
further.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Thank you for asking.
And I do want to point out that, the conversation doesn't stop here. The conversation goes all the way to town council.
Sure.
Um,
So this is a recommendation we're making. It is not an approval. And
And-
council can choose.
I would request if the recommendation is unfavorable for specific items that need to be addressed, because we can go forward to town council. This is, it's an advisory vote. If we have the specifics to address, then we can evaluate, whether we go to town council, whether we go back to the drawing board, that sort of thing. But without specifics, this board's vote is simply a no and not what we want to see here.
Right. Makes sense.
So at least I think that's different. A vote no ends our conversation. It goes to town council. It doesn't kick it to the next meeting.
If we vote in the affirmative for this motion, then that ends it here.
Right, yes.
If we vote negative,
Right.
then we are allowed to bring up another motion. We're allowed to table it for another meeting, since town council's given us additional time. I would recommend, if we table it, we are saying that, yes, we could consider this if we have more information or our concerns are, we're more comfortable with our concerns. Therefore, at this point, since we have a motion on the floor to deny this, all those in favor of denying this and ending the conversation tonight, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed to denying this, which will allow us to continue the conversation, please respond with nay.
Nay.
Okay, to my count, we have 2 ayes and 5 nays. Therefore, the motion is defeated and we're still in conversation. Now, is there a motion to continue this? Is there a motion to approve this?
We in discussion still?
We're
back to open
we'd
discussion?
Still be in discussion, yes.
Okay, so I'm probably gonna ask a question before.
By
before-
approve this, I may approve the recommendation recommend to council.
And I'll just request the same thing for if the board votes to continue to provide some specifics for us to be looking at.
Right, otherwise you're just coming back here hoping that if we hear it again, we'll be more comfortable with it.
just like us that much, huh?
Well, you're always welcome. It's good
Yeah.
to see a crowd here.
Yeah, my
So-
comment, if I make a recommendation to table it to the next meeting, is because, to your point, which didn't go unnoticed by me, that how long have we been on the clock on this, and we should already have our ducks in a row. I will tell you that you all are paid professionals representing the builder. We're volunteers representing the residents of Mills River. And I want to make sure I get it right. So if more time on the clock is necessary, then that's what I want. So I do make a motion that we table this until the next meeting.
I second it.
Okay, we do have a motion to table. All those in favor of tabling till the next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And those opposed, me, I think we've got enough information. So, and.
Oh, I think they've done a wonderful job.
They've
I'm
done a
just saying, I don't want to not do my job
that's
as a
fine.
volunteer
That's-
representative of the
I
residents of
agree.
Mills River.
And I'll just add, this is a legislative board making a legislative decision. Y'all can contact us and I will request that so that we can be efficient with this board's time.
Sure. So now, what more do we want to see? Let's at least give them that guidance.
Well,
What-
I don't feel we need another in-person visit, and that's not because you guys haven't been great. I just don't know that that's needed. I think the hours are long enough that we're probably getting counterproductive at a certain point on the clock over here.
Mhm.
And
I think that for us, of course, you would want to be here.
email a thought or two or a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
not in a group email, just a reminder, we can't do that, but we can
Yeah.
one-off reach out through my.
If y'all don't have our contact information already, we can make sure you get it. I just want to make sure, that number one, we're using the board's time efficiently, and number two, we have the people here to address the questions, so
Well, let me add a little context as well. I hear from residents all the time that, oh, you didn't know that Mills River Crossing, you know, those places, remember, oh, we got Duke on the massive building next to the fire department. Oh, we didn't know about the townhomes and being able to cluster them there and those sorts of things. So that's what I don't want to hear again. I want to make sure I'm doing my job. And so that's the context, not that you guys have provided all the information, but just need, for me, to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I hate to interrupt. Oh my goodness, I'm loud. I never got who voted against that motion.
The last motion, I voted against it.
And everyone
To
else
table.
was for.
And Mr. Foster.
And Mr. Foster. Okay, thank you.
And just a point from me, I just ask that if you do exchange emails with the applicant, that you copy Arlie and myself on that, so we're aware of those communications.
I don't mind going for you and then forwarding them or whatever you need to do. So.
We just have to be careful about replying all to any email because that could be considered a meeting. So
My suggestion would be to email questions to Mr. Malachek and have him send us a list to respond to.
let's give them something to address. If we're gonna keep talking about this, let's give them either a path forward or, you know, at least enough information to to give it a try. So thank you very much. Okay. All right. We've been at this for 2.5 hours. Thanks to everyone who's been sitting for 2.5 hours. If we would like to take a short break before we move on, why don't we take or if, I know y'all have come out tonight to talk about rezoning. And we hate to disappoint y'all for being here and sitting. If we could hurry up and maybe get through in the next 30 minutes, we could press on. Otherwise, if we want to take a 10-minute break.
No, I need like 4.5 minutes.
10, okay, let's take 5 minutes. Thank you. was rather loosely defined, but that's okay. The 2.5 hours is pretty loosely defined, so. And for the record, I have been in meetings that lasted 21 hours, not straight, but the time all was said and done, I'm not looking to hit that record.
Oh, just true.
I bet you have. Yeah.
Yeah, when you meet Jasmine, you want, you be able to tell the all way on John's time.
Okay. So I'll call the meeting back to order. Thanks everyone for staying. We had a really good meeting. The next item of business, of course, is the town initiated rezoning of mixed use residential or mixed use district in South and West Mills River to rural residential district. We had a really good meeting, and thanks to everyone who came out to that on the 23rd, 26th, 23rd. And yeah, July 23rd. My wife handles the dates, so she schedules her sneezes. If I have something to be scheduled, I give it to her. Yes, she hates when I say that. It'd be a quiet ride home. So hopefully. So a lot of things have been said. We listened, I listened. I definitely understand Mr. Frady's point about having a home business. We're not talking a auto collision center such as is moved into where the Land Rover, they're off 280. That probably wouldn't be very desirable in the residential. However, if someone has a garage and they work on vehicles, I don't think that would be a problem. It's a home-based business. I don't think that's what and if we need to spell that out as being allowable home-based businesses to an extent, I would think we might want to do that. But the intent of this is not to exclude every single possible commercial use. There are some uses that are allowed in the residential and other things, but it's more the big type uses that we would want to exclude. Mr. Cowan's comments about NC 280 and it being a corridor, and if where's the commercial going to go? Because there we do, even in our rather large town, square mile wise, there are relatively small areas where commercial can really reasonably go. And yet the balancing act is not wanting to live off of Hendersonville Road. So I would recommend tonight we discuss a few more things and then we bring this back up next month. I don't think we're really under a time restriction for this, are we?
It's the planning board initiated the rezoning, so y'all.
So we aren't, so anytime we're talking about property rights and the use of someone's property, I do think it needs to be very deliberate. And it's, pretty much beat it to death before we make a decision, because once it's done, it's hard to undo. Once that decision's made, and it is certainly not the intention of the planning board to recommend someone losing a great deal of value on their property. It's more along the lines of the quality of life and the feel of Mills River, as much as we can protect and preserve the feel of Mills River. We all live here for a reason. Even those of us that live here cause it's home, it's where we grew up, we stay here because it's Mills River. And we want to keep that as much as possible. So that being said, I've filibustered enough here. Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment. Thank you. And that is, and Jerry, thank you for bringing that up. And just some context for those who are here and some context for bless your soul if you're still actually listening online. And that is right now it's Mills River mixed use, which is just two words for whatever the heck you want to do, right? I mean, there's really no restrictions.
Really no
right?
restrictions.
So each time we delay this, those who know that there are no restrictions are just chomping at the bit and getting their proposals ready and that sort of thing. And so what we did was, okay, let's let's look at the, the 2040 plan, rural residential. Let's look at a mix of residential and business, things that would be in keeping with the rural nature of Mills River. Certainly not wanting to negatively impact a family business or anything like that. If we move this to town council and we recommend that they implement this zone where we've recommended, and there's more process that to go through for the town council can vote on it, but if we do that, we still have the ability at some point in the future for somebody or more than one person to come back and say, this is something we need to adjust in that particular zone. If you remember a year ago, I think it was, across the road from the elementary school, there was that metal building, which was there long before any homes were, and it got rezoned residential. Brought it before the planning board. We recommended to town council that they were able to maintain the business and expand and that sort of thing. So that's not it's not a done deal that if we if we move it to council and recommend that they vote to rezone it, that we can't make adjustments along the way. But that's a much stronger position to be in to combat with minimum lot sizes, 1.5 acres, other folks who want to stack 4 times, 5 times the number of homes that they've already stacked in town at 7/10 of an acre. We have nothing to stand on now. We would have more to stand on and then adjust for things that we may have been oversight when we created this zone. So that's just my thought. And I would absolutely not want to continue to delay it before council.
One other thing that I want to bring up is maybe everybody's not aware of it. It's for future zoning of new, well, it wouldn't bother pre-existing business. They'd be grandfathered in, right?
Yeah, they could continue operating as a non-conforming use, but they could not expand.
Yeah. Okay.
They could, and someone can continue that non-conforming business as long as it's not abandoned for 6 months or more.
Which is what we had across from Glen Marlow.
That is in the language.
We approved that immediately, but we didn't have conditional zoning. We do now, and because we don't want to do, Mike said it perfectly, our intention is not to hurt small family businesses, but protect the small family atmosphere. Okay? The grandfathering and continued use of the cell requires, it's already in there, they have maximum 6 months to continue use.
It's
Otherwise it reverts.
It's a separate section of code under the non-conformity section, but yes, that applies to all
That's
of
what
it.
happened in Glen Marlow with the rayon company.
Correct. They were a non-conforming use and could continue but not expand.
But we didn't have conditional zoning in all these prior conversations. Do have that. I'm glad Mike brought it up, because that's really critical for us to remember. Do you have the table in the approved uses of, under rural residential, the created zoning?
I do.
I'm
Would
sorry.
you like it on the screen?
You know me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And-
I'm sorry. So the approved uses is not just housing. We put a lot of thought to it. The good news is we're still having a conversation. This is still a
Yeah.
conversation phase.
If I remember right, the auto repair or whatever was just not having vehicles outside. But certainly inside, no limit to that. That was, no, I know that. I'm saying those are things we try to think of as yeah. Yeah, that's not going to magically appear inside the building there, Jerry. I got you.
Yeah, an existing business.
Right, that would be a
grandfathered in.
new business,
Yeah.
right? Existing business.
Jerry, you mind coming up front? I'd like to have your input on this.
We had the same, we almost did this before with the planning board. But we had a problem with devaluing people's property. You take, let me just, I don't know, the Fulham property. They're on 280. They just sold a lot of the back property to a developer, which I understand that might be part of why, actually, I had a guy from the council tell me that's why you guys, one of the things you guys are trying to do was limit them. But, you got people that's got roadfront property and they've saved it for years because they knew this is a corridor through Mills River, and I know people may not want commercial up and down 280, but that's where it needs to be. Where else does it need to be? So you're devaluing people's property is what I'm getting at. just like across the hill from me, Sydney Kitchen's old place there. Is anybody familiar with that place? Rise Construction is there now. It was a Serpentarian before. So they've got basically about 2 acres with a small house on it and a metal building behind. They sold this property, what was it, 2 years ago, I think, for $850,000 on the highway. So if this was in place with this, the way it is now, the way you guys are proposing it, what do you think, what would this house sell for? What would this place sell for now? Probably half that.
You know, you're not gonna quote me on a price, but your point is valid and one we've brought up many times.
Yes. I
The
mean,
less-
you're just killing.
The
real
highest
estate
and best
values on
use is
people.
impacted.
Yeah.
There's no denying.
And, and you know, I'm not trying to beat it down, but I'm just saying that you got to consider that. There's a lot of people that have property on this road, just like Jimmy said too,
Right.
you know, that
Yeah,
it's
we
really
considered
hurting them,
that.
you know?
Considered exempt or having a corridor where more uses would be allowed
Right.
on either side of 280.
And it's kind of crazy in
keep
my
the
mind.
commercial-
Got a 300 unit condo place going in on one side of the town. And then you're not going to let somebody have a home business on the other side of the town. I mean, it just makes.
Well, we do let them have a home business, but I think what you're saying is, well, there's been a lot of conversation.
Well,
Just so you
here's
know.
what I'm saying is if somebody had vacant property on 280
Mhm.
and this goes in, then they can't sell it for a
Commercial.
commercial business.
Right, and then
Somebody couldn't put a barber shop in
It's a
there.
different, it's a
Somebody
different,
couldn't put a, you know, whatever in there.
right,
Dentist office.
and I get that, and the value is in the commercial, value of that property,
Yeah.
and I get that, but that.
Maybe you could go so far from 280 and then
Well, but the
everything
unlimited
past
use
that.
of unlimited commercial use of that property along 280 doesn't match, not a description that we came up with, but the description in the 2040 comprehensive use plan for rural residential. It doesn't match that. We didn't come up with that. And so we're trying to match that description with the zone, and that's how we came up with
When
that.
was
So, but
this-
the only people it negatively impacts is those who own that property.
Yes.
So.
When was the ZZ brought into place? That's what really floors me. Because when it was set up, it was a R30. The whole town was R30. There was no way around that until I guess this ZZ was brought into place.
I think
No,
it's been
conditional zoning.
mixed use.
Yeah,
since
mixed
the
use
beginning.
was
Yeah.
the original zoning. Conditional
No, I'm
zoning.
not talking about zoning up there. It's all been R30 was the way Mills River, even in the mixed use areas, you couldn't build on less than 3/4 of an acre, 30,000 square
30,000.
feet.
Right.
26.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Right.
But
That-
now we got, I mean, how did that come about? So this is what's worrying us, I guess, is the CZ zoning, you know, how.
Earlier tonight.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
how
the
did
thing
come
with
about?
that is it's multifamily is still allowed up to 4 units per acre. And it's multifamily is
R30?
allowed up to 4 units per acre.
Yeah, so like the townhomes off Jeffers Road,
Mhm.
that was different process. That was the special use permit. But
Special use
the
permit.
ordinance still said 4 units an acre.
Is that going forward?
And so, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and so now we've changed the process because council wanted more control over it to this conditional zoning, because you can say no for, it's less binding on
Right.
how they can make a decision. And so conditional zoning just changes the process and the decision making, but it's still 4 units an acre. And that's always been for multifamily.
Yeah.
When that started.
I didn't
before
realize
my
that
time.
was because it seemed like at the beginning of the inception of the town, it was 30,000 square foot
Everywhere else,
everywhere.
yeah, everywhere else for single family detached,
Yeah.
it's always been 30K per
30,000.
lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, in rural residential, you can't have 4 units per acre, correct?
Unless you're applying for a multifamily development. which
So that could
requires town
still
council.
go, but it would require town council. Okay.
And again, now that we've implemented conditional zoning, that's limited geographically to those areas in the future land use map that call for more uses and growth. So
And-
you would never see a multifamily development applied for in the southern part of town unless it's in that commercial, I don't even know if we use that, the commercial crossroads area, because most of that area is this rural residential category, and multifamily is not allowed to even apply in those areas.
Okay, so MRRR, no multifamily unless it falls in an area that would qualify for conditional zoning.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Kind of. No.
So basically, it's got to meet these requirements
Yeah.
based on parcel size in order to get the conditional zoning for multifamily. So what we saw tonight out at the at the town limits, at the river, would not work. Most of the areas along 280 because it's not big enough to be conditionally zoned. But
So you wouldn't have to worry about that out that way anyway.
we shouldn't have to. Now, yeah,
It went, we've
I
gone back and
understand
forth about applying this and
to
one of the
all
council-
MU.
One of the council members has even suggested, why aren't we looking, or asked the question, why aren't we looking at all of MRMU? And a lot of different answers on why we're limiting it, but this is from Turnpike down.
And
then you got commercial zones, like you say, like where the BP and all that is right.
they're already there, they're grandfathered in,
Yeah.
but that is a
Crossroads.
community crossroads, which does allow that.
So that feedback from the future land
Not
use
from a
map.
zoning standpoint, but from a future use standpoint.
From a future use, yeah.
So how did you come up with those, the crossroads, just because the business was already there?
That's the 2040 map.
That was
Came
the
up with
2040
that.
map.
Not
That
zoning,
predates
but the
me.
future use of that area. So
When was the 2040 map?
I believe 2021, but it was before me, so.
The comprehensive plan and the map was adopted in April of 21.
So the survey is where the input.
Yeah, that was informed by community input
Right.
and steering committee and council and planning board.
So it's impossible not to negatively impact somebody. One of the not comebacks, I'm sorry, one of the rebuttals for, well, it hurts, 280 frontage. Well, if you put in all commercial on the front row on 280, the residents directly behind them get hurt in value. And then we get an argument about who got hurt worse. The person who's, 50 feet from the dollar store, or the person, and we just went down this rabbit hole of it's impossible to check a positive box for everybody. It was the one consistent thing we have, and I mentioned these 5 buckets earlier right here. The feedback from the comprehensive plan in 2021 was largely in favor of rural residential. The Farm Preservation Committee, Lisa and I, and Councilman Austin and Cantrell and Kirby Johnson and Brett, it was absolutely unanimous there that protecting green spaces. And one of the questions that came up in that committee, at least you might remember this, was, do we just want it to look rural when you're out on the secondary roads driving home? Or do we want it to look rural when you're driving through town?
The 5-lane highway.
Right.
Rural is a
Right.
5-lane highway.
It's not, that's relative
Well,
though. And you know what? Property after property that came up by people that have been here for multiple generations were properties on 280 and 191 and Schoolhouse Road that they wanted to preserve. They were the absolute main corridor. They barely named any of the secondary ones. So we kept coming back to that. And then the town council had the opportunity, planning board had the opportunity to create rural residential zoning, which we haven't applied anywhere. And any conversations we had, the details differed, but the general direction was less dense, limit use. Then we sent out the survey, and then we had the meeting last week, and it is absolutely obvious to me, and I know you took the same notes I did of the yeses and nos as everyone spoke. It's 80-90% preserve it.
And if I can pause you for a
No,
second,
please, need
Brian,
to, otherwise it just go.
no, Mr. Malachek, would you be willing to discuss the online survey and how you were able to bring that into more of an accurate view?
I'll go real quick. Yeah, could you pull up the slides? Yeah. We had a whole presentation about the survey results, so I'll just go through the first summary.
Yeah, just
We basically focused on residents and respondents that only live in this area. And let me switch documents. And I'm just gonna summarize what's in your staff report too for people listening. So we had 312 responses in total. It was revealed at the public input meeting on July 23rd that there were certain community members that submitted multiple responses over multiple days opposing the rezoning.
Mhm.
Staff received an email every single time a response was submitted, and we have access to all of the responses and the timestamps on them. So when a response is submitted every 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, with similar language, we highlighted those as suspect, and those were removed from the results.
okay.
So after, there were about 85 of them. So after those were removed, we were left with 224 responses in what I'm calling the corrected survey data. So 224 out of 1,000 plus surveys is about a 21.5% response rate, even with the fraudulent ones removed. And then we analyzed that data, the 224 responses. And so about 87%, actually, why don't I just go through the slides, Kevin?
Okay.
So this is just for people in the rezoning area. So again, this is a scale. Do you strongly disagree or fully agree with it? So if you add up the 70%, the 5%, the 9%, the 3%, you should come up with, what'd I say? 87. So 87% of people are on the agree side of the spectrum with limiting property uses. Do you agree or disagree with the density requirement? Again, 70% for 10, but if you add up those other columns next to it, it's even higher. Do you agree with limiting residential density? This actually one was a little more mixed. So we got 51% and 10 strongly agree. And then again, if you add those couple columns next to that in the agree side of the spectrum, that's going to be your total. So again, still more than 50% agreeing to limiting density. Could we allow more than one residential dwelling on a parcel? 60% saying no. 30% saying yes. Accessory dwelling was a little more mixed. You can see the spectrum is a little spread out, but we got 30% in the strongly agree category. And then residential building setbacks is something we asked too, because again, mixed use doesn't have those now. So 65% were in favor of implementing those. I can keep going if you want, but that was the highlight.
I think that's
Okay.
pretty good.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Sorry you had to go to all that work to.
Can you go up to the mic
sir.
if you're gonna ask a question?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do it real quick. I'm a landowner here. I do not live here. Am I considered part of the, because I responded to that.
If you responded, do you live in the rezoning area, and you responded no,
I responded, no, correct.
then you're not in that data.
Okay,
Because you
so,
don't live there.
but I pay taxes here. So is this really a good representation then? Because you have other people, there are plenty of people who own things here, not just developers or anything, and I'm not a developer. But, is that representative?
I have other data sets I can go through, but in the interest of time, I'm just limiting it to that
Okay,
one.
I'm throwing this out. I'm not
Mhm.
here to argue or anything.
Yes, we are landowners on the corridor of 280.
Sorry,
Yes,
no,
ma'am,
Mike.
please.
Just a-
Yeah, please.
Kim
Awesome.
McCoy.
Thanks for coming
good to
out
see
here.
you. So we didn't get any notification about the survey. I own this land with my siblings. None of us knew anything about the survey. And, didn't really know anything about the meeting on July the 23rd. So we would have liked to have been able to attend that. And we just, we just kind of feel like we've been left out of this and I'd really like to get a copy of what rural residential is. Just being told what we can do with our property after being multi-generational, owners all these years is kind of concerning. And we just like to be involved in it more because like I said, we didn't receive any notification except some little card, I think, that we got after the meeting on July 23rd.
Take my card,
Okay.
contact me. We sent a postcard to every address that we could pull from the county land record database in that area. And all the I can't remember when they were delivered, but the majority of the postcards were delivered in June.
So the 21% of the data that you have that you showed on your charts, is that the landowners on the 280 corridor? Or is that Mills River as a whole?
The charts I just went through,
Yes.
when people took the survey, they had one question that said, do you live in this area? And you could say yes, no, or I live here part-time, like a second home. And so based on how you answered that question, that's how we filtered it. Again, I can go into 3 more sets of data where we have one set just for the people that answered, yes, I live in this area. We have one set for people that just live in the town limits, and then we have one set of data for everyone that responded. But again, I just showed that first one in the interest of time tonight.
Is there a way to find out from your data how many people that are actually affected by this change in that 280 corridor?
It's not just the 280 corridor, it's the town limits.
For the zoning map.
People Peak and then all the way to the Pennsylvania County, not just on the border.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'd like to see how, the percentage of people that are actually affected by this change if it goes through, what,
That was those charts I just showed. So again, the people that answered, yes, I live here in this affected area, their responses were that data I just showed.
And you can
Okay.
provide all that data.
Yeah.
So,
Is that what you're asking?
yes, sir.
Oh, road frontage?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There-
we did not ask that question specifically. And again, I think it was then mentioned at the last meeting, the survey is not perfect, it's just a tool.
Yeah, because everyone that already sold their commercial property or got to build their commercial business, they probably don't want to see any more growth, they're probably fine with it, but we're not fine with it, we kind of would like to have more of a say in what's happening and,
yes, ma'am. It's the process, being able to contact people is not always perfect. It's, but thank you for being here, and please watch our meetings.
No, but your point I
everybody.
get. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
the
get your
point is,
point.
yes, it was incorporated, what, in 2003, 2000? With the understanding that we would maintain the rural nature of Mills River. And yet that didn't happen. And a lot of people on that corridor, who had farmland or whatever, sold some land, made some dollars for commercial properties. But again, and so I absolutely sympathize with that. But again, as a board, we ran into, here's what mixed use is, and here's what the 2040 future use map is, all public input to create all of these things. And the mixed use did not map out at all to what the uses for rural residential said on the 2040 future use map. And that's why we're trying to reconcile those two things. Because it didn't call for unlimited commercial along 280 or any of those sorts of things. It called for very limited commercial
Yeah,
in that future use map. And we're trying to create a zone that matches that. That's just how we came up with that.
And part of another thing.
I wish we
one of
could
our
go back and
concerns-
fix those things in the past. I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's okay.
But we
sure.
can't. And so.
One of the things that weighs heavily on us, I think, as a group, is I'm just going to point this area up in here. This is the same zoning as this area in here, other than the overlay. So you could have a use right up here, although it may not be convenient, it may not be in a great location, yet there are uses up in there that are uses by right under the mixed use zoning that nobody probably wants to live next to. And so, from council, most people agree that, that's really not desirable. The 280 corridor, we've discussed setting that aside, and not, one of the discussions was, do we want this to affect the corridor, 500 feet either side of 280, 1,000 feet either side of 280? But a big part of it is trying to take care of these areas up here, down here, and protect them from some of the stuff that can just go in by right.
Mike, if council votes to implement that in that area there, does that prohibit the ability in the future to create a corridor in that zone? So it could create a corridor at some future point, even after.
with additional uses allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could do
So-
that. So it's not an end all be all, but we're trying to, there's a lot, if you go online, look at mixed use, and it's
Some
unbelievable.
pretty scary
what you
things
do.
that could go in by right.
So
And when
if
it's
we,
by right, none of us have a vote in it.
yeah, and I agree
Just
with
go
you.
ahead and do a corridor. Mhm.
Micah, that we've talked about. But again, by the time that we get it perfect, we may lose a lot of land to things that most folks that I'm aware of don't want to see. And so that's where we could still create this and then go back and create a corridor. Because I
Part of
think
the reason we
time
did
of-
not talk about applying it to the entire mixed use area. Let's just focus on the place we have the most likelihood to
Mhm.
succeed.
And we
Thank
did
you.
hear some comments from people that wanted it throughout the whole, anywhere there's MRMU, let's do this.
Yeah.
To protect them. And yeah, I think our idea is more of a protection than a limitation. So,
Could I ask about the mixed,
Yeah,
John
come on up.
Sikorsky, I'm sorry. And I have a active permit along 280, okay, just so that that's clear. And I'm worried if I don't get things done,
mhm.
my land could go away, and I have done lots of stormwater stuff, and there's more rain down there than up here. But
Mhm.
so, I mean, would I be grandfathered? Could I change my current? I believe I have 44,000 square feet permitted, and in an active way, but could I change it to something else? And that's really my question. And I'm not trying to, this answer I don't need an answer today by any means. I'm just here trying to protect myself. And I think I have other facilities, and I've been a pretty good citizen and try to do things the right
Sure.
way.
Yes, sir.
So I did, yes, sir. Correct, but forgive me, if you change the mixed use to an acre and a half, storage is based on density. And it probably will economically affect me dramatically. And therefore, I probably shouldn't build storage in a acre and a half zoned area,
He has how long from the time it was approved?
as long as it's continuous.
Yeah, he's already done site work, set him, yeah, so the zoning permit, I don't want to say is null and void, but basically he's done work, so it's still valid.
Yeah, and there's no expiration?
I mean, 6 months is an expiration date, but again, if there's continuing work, he's started the project.
Yeah.
But to answer his question, it's very simple. I think we talked about state law has permit choice. If you submit a permit under mixed use regulations, you get those regulations. If you submit under mixed use and it changes, you get a pick. If you submit after the rezoning, you get the rural residential regulations, and there is no flexibility.
What is the pick? Excuse my terminology, the middle one you mentioned.
So let's say.
Old or new zoning.
Yeah, so let's say you submitted an application next week and council rezoned everything a week later. Because your application was under consideration while the rule changed, you could pick which zoning district applies to you because you applied under one and it changed while it was under
It's
consideration.
fair, thank you. I'm
But
not,
if you apply after the zoning changes, you are bound and staff is bound to just review based on that ordinance.
and so I'm potentially slightly changing my mix. And that's why I'm here, just to make sure I don't want to be fighting anybody. I want to try to do the right things as a citizen, et cetera. So, and business owner. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, we've kind of had some public comment added in, and I'm glad to hear public comment. It's 20 till 10. Y'all have been here a long time. However, this is an important thing. If anyone else would like to comment, I'd love to hear from you. Yes, ma'am, please.
So I'm Jenny Seeley. I live in North Mills River off Old Fanning Bridge Road. So I really do support zoning specific areas for specific use. The BMW motorcycle place went in, literally kind of across the road. I can hear the motorcycles all night, or especially all day, but, into the night. And then on top of that, it makes getting the mail kind of crazy. So I know that we need to properly, kind of designate areas because this is like a very, noisy kind of business to plunk right down in the middle of all of us residential. Please zone us correctly. Cause, give it a couple of years and we'll really see the effects of it a couple of years later. So good luck,
Okay.
y'all.
Thank you.
Right, that's what we're looking at, trying to do,
Yeah.
protect, residents.
In light of that, and Jerry has pointed this out,
Microphone.
doing a corridor might be the best thing so that you can protect, forgive me, the hills on both sides. And, again, that's my opinion. I think Jerry stated it very nicely. you
Yeah,
know.
and I agree. It's just that implementing that doesn't eliminate the ability to create a corridor. That's what I want everybody to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Slowing it down quickly before it gets,
Oh, I can hear you.
oh, I know. Slowing it down right now doesn't eliminate anybody's ability to restrict it further in the future.
Right.
It's
Well-
just trying to reconcile poll after poll after poll that of the public that says that this is what they want to see. Yet our zoning is in complete contradiction to what every one of the majority of the polls is telling us.
Right, with mixed use, she's a
That's-
good example,
that's-
you know.
It's
what-
wide open.
That's it. Can we go back and, I think I would rather rein it in a little too far quickly.
While we're on the subject, you mentioned something that I had a thought. You said you live on South Mills River?
No, I live
Old
on
Fanning.
Old Fanning Bridge.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
I like the idea of a corridor. I like the idea of protecting some commercial property and still protecting the rural property. I don't know that, Jerry said it, it's a 5-lane. Mills River changed when the 5-lane came in. I remember what happened. Mills River changed when Food Line came in. Yeah. Mills River changed when 5 breweries came in. We can protect the rural areas, the really rural areas, and still protect some of the property along 280.
Yeah, well, and my point is, let's stop the bleeding and then we can heal the patient. So, I would make a motion that we move this as a recommended application to this area of town, rural residential, to the town council. That is the motion.
Could we do that in a way so we already have an overlay, but it's really basically for aesthetic treatments of buildings. So that's not a zoning type overlay.
Not currently, but I think when we had discussions about it, we talked about expanding that ordinance to include uses specifically for the South Boylston corridor.
So to allow uses, if we made the recommendation tonight to do this, can we do it with the opportunity to add the overlay to this, which preserves?
This goes against every
oh.
conversation we've had for the last 8 months right now, Jeff. You've
Kind of.
changed directions on us. I'd like to
It
pull the,
goes backwards.
we're going backwards right now.
We've already covered this ground and
It's
An
because,
absolute contradiction.
it's not tying anyone forever to not, the corridor can still come into an existence. There are ways that other development could happen outside of the plan that we spent months discussing and have had overwhelming support for. And we already knew that we're never going to be able to accommodate everyone. There's going to be voices that are not going to agree with every aspect of this plan, but we have to sort of, we went down this road and there are commercial areas carved out, but it's inconsistent with the 2040 plan to now kind of back, it's not what the board has put forth.
Multiple polls have said, and the majority of the citizens are hugely in favor of this. You agree at the meeting last week, right? We agree
I
with that.
agree.
The comprehensive
And-
plan agrees with that. The recent polling agrees with that. The loudest mouths in the town have come out and agreed with that. And there's no way to make everyone happy here.
I agree.
Absolutely not. But I don't know
And-
why we're considering going backwards all of a sudden. in
I'm
this
not
conversation.
necessarily talking about going backwards. I'm talking about rezoning MRMU to MRRR. Yes. And in a way that would preserve the ability for commercial along 280, which is a commercial corridor. That's my opinion on one vote.
But I think Mike needs to answer that question.
Mhm.
Can we do that, or is that gonna be a separate text amendment?
Separate text amendment.
Yeah,
You
so that would delay
you
the,
couldn't implement it now because the corridor. overlay
So,
would
but
be
it's something
used.
we can do.
Of course.
You have to redo your public hearings and everything, and that's never going to go away. We
But-
always have the
yeah,
ability
but
to do that.
it would be quicker to implement the zone and then go back and recommend that rather.
That's why I asked the question. Could it be done?
But your question was more specific than that. It was, can we make a recommendation to town council
Right.
tonight with that?
Can we make with that?
We all
And if
agree
that
that
answer is
something's going to
no,
be put there in the future, and I'm sorry, make sure my mic's on. We all agree that there's going to be a need for it. And it's going to come up and it's going to change. I mean, when this was created 20 years ago, they always, you know how many times we say this? Well, that's never going to happen. And then it happened. That's why we're having this conversation.
Mhm.
So the text amendment to add the corridor would have to be addressed by town council first before they could address the new zone.
No, so.
They could do the zoning.
Town council could adopt the rural residential zoning as it is in the code now. Before we apply new zoning regulations, we need to create them in the code first, just like we did with
Right.
this.
So we can.
So
yeah.
we're not able to recommend something to council that would include corridor overlay now because that doesn't exist in the code.
Right. So we'd have to adopt the
But there's
code.
always in the future.
Right,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah,
problem.
that's what I meant.
As soon as the next meeting, literally, we
Right.
could revisit.
Right.
So having said that, I agree with what they said. We don't touch this.
Chair, if I'm not mistaken, we have a motion on the floor,
Mhm. And we're discussing the motion. Are
right?
we good to go?
Okay, I just want to make sure another motion wasn't getting ready to be made.
The motion was
Just what-
to, I made a motion to move forward and recommend to town council
Mhm.
that they approve rural residential zoning for that area of Mills River that is currently mixed use.
Jeff, my concern was we're getting ready to have a second separate motion.
Okay, okay, I think that we do have a motion on the table. We do have that. I apologize, sir. I believe it's just the board comments because
Okay. I did write a letter asking for a vote before this vote at the last meeting.
There was a public comment that was read. He asked for
Mhm.
his property to be zoned different from everything else. That's spot zoning.
So you can apply for conditional zoning at a later date.
we could, yeah, we will talk about that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
This is a motion to approve.
So motion to approve the text amendment as it is.
Yeah, again, there's the statement of consistency. If you want to address that now or in a second motion, that's either is acceptable.
Let's go ahead and do it all in one.
No, I don't want to, yeah.
If we're gonna do it, let's do it in
So I
one.
do revise my motion to include the statement of consistency. So,
and it's listed here.
It
I don't
is
think that we need to read it,
echo.
You could just say adopted as presented.
adopted as presented. And, we can, as of next meeting, discuss a corridor and what it would take to preserve commercial.
Board's pleasure.
The board's pleasure. I think that'll be the board's pleasure to at least discuss it. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then next meeting, if
We're
it,
calling for nays?
all opposed. It was unanimous.
She was asking.
Oh, sorry. So I'd like to bring it up and we'll talk about this at council Thursday night. And please come Thursday night and let's talk about what we can do to preserve the commercial where commercial is appropriate.
Come back every night.
Please come back every night. Yes, ma'am.
Town council.
Town council
Not
meeting,
this board.
not this board. All right.
Big dogs.
That being said, I believe we're done unless we have staff reports, staff updates, no. And, anyone wants a motion that we adjourn and, we got plenty.
Judge. Huh.